Hey, thank you for watching / listening to another episode of whatever you're listening to. Paranoid American Podcast, Occult Disney, Paranoid Programming, Sound Science. There's a bunch of them, but whatever it is, I appreciate that you're listening / watching to this right now. And if you really want to support Paranoid American, if you didn't know this, in addition to being a podcast, we've actually been publishing comics since 2012, so over a decade. While I was still at Disney, I started this company to publish a little book called Time Samplers, and it's exploded into 60 different titles at this point. And the biggest one just launched, at least at the time of recording this, but it's at nasacomic.com, stands for Never a Straight Answer, and it's about Stanley Kubrick directing the moon landings. And I just want to show you some of the cool kind of exclusive things you can get by backing this thing early. So if you go to nasacomic.com, it'll automatically bring you to this Kickstarter page. And you can see, bam, hit our goal at the time of recording this, 100%. So it's definitely going to be made. So you'll absolutely get a copy of this thing if you back it. If you're listening to this in the future and this page isn't here or brought you somewhere else, then likely you can just buy it right now. So you have to skip all this and just buy the damn thing. But here's a couple little previews of artwork. Here's different variant covers that are for offered. This top left one, I actually have in print. I got a couple of prototypes printed up just to make sure that it would look good. It looks great, looks amazing, full color, gloss pages. It's got a nice hefty weight to it because it's 40 different pages of all unique art that you haven't seen before. There's also going to be a variant cover. There's going to be a hollow foil cover. And then there's a little postcard print that anybody that gets a physical copy of the comic in any form, they're going to end up getting this postcard size print here. Here's some different artwork samples from the 3 different artists that contributed to this book. And then here's the important part, the rewards. So by backing this project, you're going to get to pick some different kind of reward tier. The entry level one is this digital deluxe, which has the entire book in digital form. You'll get a PDF. It's also going to have an additional 8 different pages that aren't in any of the print versions just because they were maybe some were a little too spicy, maybe some were a slightly different art style, but I'm going to give all that in the digital deluxe along with some wallpapers and some MP3s and stuff. If you want the print one that I was just holding up here, then the entry for that one is $15. With that, you're going to get that little postcard print I mentioned. You're going to get a trading card. You're going to get a bookmark, and you'll probably get some other stuff because I always throw in extra freebies. You can ask anyone that's bought anything from Paranoid American. I hook it up with lots of extras. If you want the variant cover, which is only available in this campaign, there's a $19 tier for that. It also comes with an extra sticker. If you want the hollow foil, then that one is $29. These ones are going to be super limited. Like, these won't exist outside of this campaign for the next 30 days. So if you are listening to this in the future, sorry you missed out. You might be able to snag one in an upcoming campaign if there's extras. But if you really want this hollow foil, and you should, you can get it right now for $29. And then we've got a couple other tiers after that. We've got a 55th anniversary special for $55. That has the main cover and the foil cover and a sticker sheet and some other goodies. Here's the best value, basically. There's a $99 Cosmic Conspiracy tier, over 40% off of all the different things that are included. So this one's going to come with the main cover, the variant cover, the hollow foil cover, 3 or 4 different sticker sheets. It's going to come with 6+ stickers. It has the trading card, a bookmark. It has a custom Paranoid American Room 237 keychain. And I think the highlight of this is it's going to come with this custom embroidered Stanley Kubrick patch based on the Apollo 11 design. And if you keep scrolling down, you can see all the other extra reward tiers. All of the different items are going to be described in more detail. And I want to show you this patch right here. It's a 3-inch embroidered iron-on patch. You can put it on your Molex bag. You can put it on, anything, hats, backpacks. This is the first time we've ever done one of these custom patches, so I'm really excited about that. There's also a custom fake moon landing playset that you can select as an add-on when you go to check out. So speaking of, let's say that you're sold, you want to get a copy, you want to help support Paranoid American. If you haven't used Kickstarter before, the easiest thing to do is you just click on this project button on the page. It's both at the very top of the screen and it's at the top of the page. So you can click either one, back this project. And from here, it's going to be like a typical checkout. You're going to select which of these different tiers you want. Again, I highly recommend this $99 Cosmic Conspiracy combo. It's going to have every single thing that the campaign has to offer that's exclusive to this NASA book. You click on that, you pick the country that you're in, and then you just click on the pledge button. There's one extra last step where it's going to ask you if you want to do any add-ons, if you want to throw in like a trading card pack or another keychain or anything else. You can get some huge discounts on the backlog of Paranoid American comics. But let's say you're done with that, you click continue, and then finally, if you don't already have a Kickstarter account, you'll be prompted to make one. You can link it to Facebook. The rest of the flow is just like any typical checkout online. So I really appreciate if you would take a look. Please just back the comic, back nasacomic.com. Anyways, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Good evening, listeners, brave navigators of the enigmatic and the concealed. Have you ever felt the pull of the unanswered, the allure of the mysteries that shroud our existence? For more than a decade, a unique comic publisher has dared to dive into these mysteries, unafraid of the secrets they might uncover. This audacious entity is Paranoid American. Welcome to the mystifying universe of the Paranoid American podcast.
Launched in the year 2012, Paranoid American has been on a mission to decipher the encrypted secrets of our world. From the unnerving enigma of MK-Ultra mind control to the clandestine assemblies of secret societies. From the awe-inspiring frontiers of forbidden technology to the arcane patterns of occult symbols in our very own pop culture. They have committed to unveiling the concealed realities that lie just beneath the surface. Join us as we navigate these intricate landscapes, decoding the hidden scripts of our society and challenging the accepted perceptions of reality.
Folks, I've got a big problem on my hands. There's a company called Paranoid American making all these funny memes and comics. Now, I'm a fair guy. I believe in free speech as long as it doesn't cross the line. And if these AI-generated memes dare to make fun of me, they're crossing the line.
This is your expedition into the realm of the extraordinary, the secret, the shrouded. Come with us as we sift through the world's grand mysteries, question the standardized narratives, and brave the cryptic labyrinth of the concealed truth. So strap yourselves in, broaden your horizons, and steel yourselves for a voyage into the enigmatic heart of the Paranoid American podcast, where each story, every image, every revelation brings us one step closer to the elusive truth.
We've got another guest coming back because we got unfinished business on a few different fronts. One is that we just got like a tiny little bit into his backstory and like some of the examples. This is Jerry Marzinsky, and he's got close to 4 decades of research working sort of like on the front lines of schizophrenia research, like with the actual people, talking to them. And we've actually got somebody with an even closer firsthand experience of all this. Anon, we're going to go by Anon today. But I want to let Jerry first introduce himself and probably talk about his book. Definitely a good time to plug up front. And then I'll have him introduce Anon, and we'll go into a little bit of a presentation. And then I just want to pick both your guys' brains. So first of all, thank you for spending some time with me today. This is a really interesting topic, and let me know if there's anything that you guys want to know going in. Otherwise, I'm ready to jump in.
No, I'm good.
Okay, well, Jerry, I'll let you introduce Anon.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of recap a little bit of what we said last time. Is, like you said, I've got over 4 decades of working with schizophrenics, questioning them, talking to them, analyzing and talking with their voices. I mean, these voices that the psychiatric mafia insist are hallucinations are not hallucinations. They run very specific patterns. They're consistently negative. They're anti-religious. They foster and create negative emotion, and they energetically drain their victims. So these patterns are consistent. They're repeatable. So if these voices are running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. Hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. You can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com, go to articles, and pull up an entire list of these patterns and see them for yourself. Those of you who are working with schizophrenics, who are working in mental health settings, these things, once you see them, you'll see them. They just repeat over and over and over again. That's not something that a hallucination does. So the psychiatric mafia is insisting that these voices are hallucinations. What they are is they drive paranoid schizophrenia. If you get rid of the voices by any means, all symptoms of this dread disorder disappear with them. The medications that psychiatry gives these people only serves to tamp down the symptoms. It doesn't get at the cause. They don't know what the cause is. This is a spiritual disorder. Okay? The voices are entities. You can speak to them. They're very nasty. You ask schizophrenics, like, how much energy do they have after these voices attack them? And they will tell you, my energy's gone. So what they are is parasitic entities. They don't just hit schizophrenics, they hit us all. Matter of fact, Sherry Sweeney, who is the co-author of our book, said that every negative thought that comes into your mind comes in from outside. It comes from these entities. They put these negative thoughts in your mind to create emotional turmoil. And then once they get you all upset, they drain your energy. They hit us all. They hit schizophrenics much harder than the rest of us. The psychiatric mafia has done no research over the voices whatsoever. They just jumped up and went, we hereby declare that these voices are hallucinations. They're teaching this in the universities without any research to back it at all. The drug companies are pushing this. The psychiatrists are pushing this without a single study of any kind. So I've been talking about this for a good while, but what I wanted to do was bring on somebody who's had firsthand experience with these voices and let you hear from him, and that's Anon. So as a young man, he had a psychotic break. He was struggling with the voices. He got put into a mental hospital for about a month, I believe it was, and he's going to tell you about the struggle he has had with them. And I'll be jumping in from time to time to kind of just kind of reinforce what he's saying and what I've saw also.
And I wanted to point in too that one of my takeaways from our first talk that kind of blew my mind was that just acknowledging the voices and even pretending that it wasn't hallucinations and asking patients to explain what the voices were saying, like how loud were they, what was the tonality, just exploring it in some kind of an objective sense was almost like a death knell for trying to be in that profession, because the mentality is that it's a hallucination. Don't acknowledge it. If you acknowledge it, you're making the problem even worse. Is that still pretty much the prevalent way to approach it right now?
Yep, that's a prevalent approach. So what psychiatry is doing is like the only thing you can do for schizophrenia is their drugs. That's what they want you to believe. Okay? You can recover from this. Anon is a case in point. He fought these voices to a standstill and finally beat them back. Now, it's critical for every schizophrenic to realize that those voices do not belong to them. They're coming in from the outside. They are not their personality. They are not them. Once they realize that, they have something they can fight back against. But if you believe the psychiatric mafia, they're saying, it's you. It's your fault. Your brain is broken. There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to take our expensive, toxic psychiatric meds. That's all you can do. No, you can fight back against these things. There's ways to fight back. There's tactics to fight back. Not saying those medications are worthless. I mean, they have their use. They will calm the person down. They enable you to reach people that you normally couldn't reach. And of course, working in the prison psychology department, there were patients or prisoners in there that were so dangerous they had to be on these medications for the rest of their life. But these drugs are toxic. They cause neurological damage with long-term use. They will shrink the brain, and they've found that with long-term mental patients in psych hospitals. Long-term use of these antipsychotic drugs will neurologically permanently damage you. Now, psychiatry won't tell you that. It's not something they will bring up. They don't tell you how dangerous these drugs are. They just tell you some of the common side effects, and they wait until you're having akinesia or shakes or tremors or something like that. And then what they do is they put another drug on top of these antipsychotic drug to tamper down those symptoms while the drug continues to rot out the person's central nervous system. I mean,
yeah, I understand that part of that like modern Rockefeller medicine system is about like buying a cat in order to get rid of the mouse, and then the cat gets out of control. So then you buy a dog to get rid of the cat, to get rid of the mouse, and then it kind of turns into like a weird Rube Goldberg machine of pharmaceuticals at a certain point.
Yeah, it is, and they're all toxic. I mean, especially the antipsychotics are very toxic. They will shrink your brain.
They're tranquilizers. That's all they are. I mean, if you have a broken leg and you give yourself a tranquilizer, you might not feel the pain, but your leg's still broken. They don't cure anything. They just cover up and mask the symptoms, as Jerry said.
Yeah, they don't make the voices disappear for the most part. I think I've only seen 1 or 2 cases where they temporarily made them disappear. All they do is quiet them down. They don't get rid of them. They're treating symptoms. They're not treating cause. They don't know what the cause is. This chemical brain imbalance thing they came up with is a complete lie. It was made by Eli Lilly, a drug company, back in the 70s when Prozac came out. Complete misinformation, of complete fabrication. They're still pushing that. It's not true. There is no biochemical imbalance in the brain. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. But yet they're telling people, oh, your brain is chemically out of balance, because they don't know what causes it. It's a spiritual disorder. There is no spirituality in psychiatry or psychology. I've never heard them mention, in 8 years of studying this stuff, I've never heard them mention spirit. And we're spiritual beings. We get spiritually sick. Schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, is a spiritual disorder. It's a spiritual battle. It's not a physiological thing. You can't fix it with physical drugs because the voices are energetic. They're energetic entities.
Are we talking Christian spiritual? Like can you only solve it through Christ, or is that like fill your own, spiritualism in there, and that can also solve it?
They don't like any positive spiritual stuff. The Muslims are more aware of these things than we are. They call them the jinn. They have specific prayers to get rid of them. They talk about them whispering in their ear. They're much more aware of these negative entities than Christians are. And they have their ways to treat them. But they don't like any positive spiritual anything. They want to keep you upset, because that upsetness generates the negative emotional energy that they feed off of. They're parasites.
So I'd love to get some like firsthand accounts on. So if we can ease into it, Anon, like at what point of your life did your experience take place? Is this like, from birth, or did you go through a certain time period or event?
Oh, it was a certain time period or event. And if I might just transition, I connected up with Jerry about 2 years ago. I've never been a patient of his, but I saw the great work that he was doing and recognizing these patterns. And I said, wow, he's right on. I went through a lot of this stuff, and I give credit to him for the fact that he actually applied a scientific method to this to say, wait a second, there's patterns here. And the fact that he tried to ask his patients, well, what are the voices saying? And he was scolded and reprimanded for that. I mean, that goes against the scientific model. The scientific model is you want to inquire, you want to ask these questions. And just the whole fact that the psychiatric establishment seems to see that as being a no-no, as taboo, that's wrong. I think it's very important that the patients do explain what they're hearing, because that can help them to address it. So I was diagnosed with affective schizophrenic disorder. It was probably in the time period from about 1989 to 1992, 1993, when I was dealing with the condition. It really started after I graduated college. I was kind of at the point in my life where I was trying to determine what direction I was going to head, who I was going to be. And you could say it was a bit of a existential crisis was starting to occur. So I started to kind of read the Bible on my own without any middlemen telling me what it was all about. So I was baptized Greek Orthodox. I attended kind of a Methodist Sunday school growing up, and I participated in a Roman Catholic youth group. So I had the general Christian perspective on things, and my approach to these teachings in the scriptures were just to be as a decent, honest human being as possible, to have integrity, to try and be kind to others. I wasn't out there Bible thumping or anything else like that, quoting scripture left and right to everybody else. But I did try to generally be a good human being, to not just to take the better aspects of what we learn in our religious schools and actually apply them in everyday life. So I started to kind of read the Bible on my own, and I started to just, at first it starts out as kind of negative thoughts and then it kind of transitions into negative voices, but it was a whole gamut of things that were going on at the time. So I was about in my mid-20s, and I think a lot of suppressed trauma that I dealt with in my family situation was coming to the surface or being stirred up, so to speak. But I remember at times I would say I felt almost euphoric, Christ-like in a sense, divine. And I didn't quite understand what was going on. And then other times I felt like I was being kind of dragged to the darkest depths of hell, like just being brought down to such total point of despair. And things started kind of telling me in my head that I was worthless, to give it up. Very, very negative thoughts. And some of the patterns that Jerry points out are right on, like the voices they want you to isolate against others because they want your full attention. They kind of tell you that you're worthless, and they tend to be very strong at night. I'd say from like maybe 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning, the so-called witching hours. That's a time where I guess the veil is very thin in our dreamlike state, and that's when they tend to come and make one feel very anxious, paranoid, and it becomes like a vicious loop because you're feeling anxious enough, and then this stuff gets added on. I really had none of these symptoms until my mid-20s after graduating college, where I was trying to kind of determine my direction in life as a young adult, to establish myself as a career.
Let me add a number of other things they say, because almost everybody's experienced this. These voices will tell you you're stupid, you're ugly, you're worthless, you're hopeless, you're no good, nobody likes you, people are following you, you're hopeless. I mean, every negative thing that you can think of.
You're bringing me back to Catholic Sunday school.
Yep, it doesn't do any good. I mean, it's and they're consistently negative. They very seldom, if ever, say anything positive. So the question became, what holds them on that negative trajectory? How come they are not random, like all kinds of regular hallucinations? Regular hallucinations are all over the place. These things are consistently negative. They're consistently anti-religious. They're consistently derogatory, insulting, defamatory. I mean, just every rotten thing that you can imagine. That's what they tell these people. They want to keep them upset. They want to keep them generating that negative emotional energy. And then when they leave, that person is drained. And they don't even know that the voices took their energy. They're not even aware of it. They just know they feel bad.
So I don't know if it's food for these entities or if it's a drug for them. It could be both. It could be either or. But there's definitely, they were definitely trying to increase the amount of negative energy or agitation that their target or the victim was enduring. So I graduated from college with a degree in mechanical engineering. So I have a very logical, scientific mind. And I had taken various psychology courses. I took abnormal psychology in college. So I was aware of DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manuals, and I was aware of schizophrenia, what it was about. So when I was diagnosed with this, I had kind of a background understanding. I was like, wow, I know what the textbooks say, but there's times where it felt like one would describe as an attempted possession, like something was trying to take over my psyche, and I was fighting it. So I had to kind of go in a state of a split mind to deal with this. Part of me kind of became the observer, the scientist, because I wanted to see what was going on here with my mind. Another aspect was like something that was taking me over at times. I mean, it was like changing my personality.
And that's what it does. They will push the person's personality out of the way and keep pushing it, pushing it, pushing it. If you don't fight back, they will take it over.
I know some various occult aspects can refer to these as walk-ins. I mean, there's other terminologies used out there to describe these experiences. So I was starting to crash psychologically just because of all these negative thoughts that were being put in my head, how worthless I was being told that I was. And I wasn't a loner by any means in high school. I mean, I had friends. I graduated college. I was fairly successful in getting on with my life and everything. But one thing, a common theme with schizophrenics is they seem to have gone through some severe trauma in their life, either emotionally or physically. So I feel like that it's almost like sharks feeding. They're looking for the wounded ones who have possible fissures. I call them fissures in your psyche because it's like an entry point that they can get in. And I think that was occurring. And these entities, I'll call them entities for lack of a better word. And these entities seem to have full access to their target or victim's thoughts. And they can plant thoughts in their heads as well. So we all have our own internal voice, the common voice that when we think. And what I found looking back, that when these entities attack, it doesn't feel like your normal internal voice. It feels like something different is in there.
But it sounds the same, doesn't it?
Overall, it does. I would say
the intention is different.
Yeah, the intention is very different. I would say most of the time it sounded the same because I was going back and forth on the fence. I was on the fence. It's like, are these my own thoughts, or is this something external of me? I mean, we're taught there's no such thing as demons or archons and jinn, and then all of a sudden I'm encountering this stuff. So with having the scientific mind, I was in a state of cognitive dissonance. It was like, okay, is this just my mind playing tricks on me, or is there something really external attacking me or tormenting me?
And what makes it so difficult is that the voices sound just like your normal thoughts, the thousands of normal thoughts that run through your mind on a given day. For the most part, there's no, we are the voices. And no, they sound just like your normal thoughts. And the patients I've had who've asked these voices, who are you? What are you? They would respond, we are you. They want the person to believe that they are them, that those thoughts are theirs. If they succeed in that, you're gone.
So I was starting to psychologically crash from all these attacks, and like the torment was waking up, and there was a lot of other stuff going on. I mean, it's a whole gamut of different things that were occurring. But I remember I started to get so depressed among this that I lost, like, my weight dropped. I started to only see in black and white. I couldn't see colors anymore. Just aspect of depression was taking over. Food lost all taste and flavor, and then these voices are very strong thoughts would tell me that I wasn't worthy of food, that I was worthless, not to eat. So eventually, what happened? I remember I was getting some support through a social services program, and they put me on lithium. And I mean, I was so depressed at the time, I couldn't even think. I couldn't even add numbers together. My mind was so overwhelmed with what these thoughts were doing. And there's times I would try and speak, and it's like I couldn't even get my own words out. Like I'm just kind of go, because the thoughts were so, your mind is so overwhelmed with these other thoughts or influences that you can't even figure out what are your own thoughts and sorting through this.
Can I ask you, because I don't want to forget, when you're going through that sort of an experience where there's so many thoughts that are flooding your mind that you can't get words out, are you like fully taking in everything that everyone else is saying and doing around you, and you're just unable to respond? Or are you also like sort of absorbed to the point where if someone's talking to you, you might not be paying attention to them?
I was definitely very aware of my outside environment. Is when I tried to express my own thoughts or speak what I wanted to say, that there's a difficulty involved with it.
So could you observe other people, like seeing that you're struggling and pick up on all the nonverbal cues and nuances throughout this?
Well, there's times I would say where, and it's the thing with the schizophrenia is that it was tough to sort through what was normal reality and what wasn't, because I feel these entities distort your reality. I mean, there's times where you felt like these entities were acting out their aggression against you in other people, like things that were being said to me and that sort of thing. And then the question becomes, okay, was it just my imagination, or were these archons or demons kind of trying to enter other people to attack me too, in a sense. And I think that's where sometimes the schizophrenic patient can feel very paranoid, because they feel like these entities can be working through other people at times too. But I was very aware of what was going on around me. And what happened is my body started thrashing. Like my arms and legs started moving. My arms would go up and down like this. And I wasn't the one moving them. I felt like something else was moving it. And so I was admitted to an emergency room at the local hospital. And this would have been about, I think, end of summer, fall of 1990 when this had occurred. So the emergency room conducted all these tests on me. They did MRI. They tested for any drugs in my system or that sort of thing. And they concluded it was psychological, not neurological. My family thought I had been on a lithium overdose, but they never said that, he overdosed on lithium or anything else like that. And I'll tell you the truth, I was so depressed, I couldn't even remember to take the lithium half the time. So leading up to that, I was only on lithium maybe for a couple months tops. So I ended up in the emergency room. From there, I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. It was actually Princeton House, located here in New Jersey. And I was in there for about a total of 4 weeks. And you're basically a guinea pig there. They put me on all sorts of drugs and pills, and each day they try something different because this wouldn't work or that wouldn't work. And I got the same speech that Jerry talked about. It's your brain chemistry is out of balance. We got to get it back into balance. And I asked them, well, then what's the baseline supposed to be? Because if you get blood work for cholesterol, that sort of thing, it has a general baseline where the readings should be. I asked that question. Having a chemistry background, being in engineering, I asked them, what is the baseline? I got blank stares from all the staff there. Nobody could answer that question.
They had no idea. They didn't know they'd been lied to in graduate school.
Because if your brain chemistry is off, okay, what chemicals are off? The idea is to get them back in balance. But there's no science behind that. It's total BS as far as that goes. These medications, they're tranquilizers, and they do rot the brain for the long term. For the short term, yes, sometimes you do need them for the short term in certain cases. But I think the pharmaceutical industry has changed their whole marketing approach. It used to be for the short term, but over the years, they've made it more into the long term because they can sell more drugs, they make more money, and so on and so forth. But I was given all different pills, octagon ones, different polygon shapes, oval, some are pink, some are blue, and they give you the different combination, like a small little paper cup. And these are not the type of drugs that you want to do as a recreational sport or anything like that. I mean, they're awful. They can make your mouth feel so dry sometimes that you can't even talk. There were days I felt like I had 70-pound weights on my feet. I could barely lift my feet. There's a few days I don't even remember being in the hospital, just what the drugs were doing.
Were there any good ones, or were they all bad?
I would say they were all bad.
Yeah.
I mean, and personally, I didn't want to be on these drugs. I hated the fact that I felt like I had to rely on medicine to get my faculties back. So I was kind of a little resistant to even taking them, for that matter.
See, they have no. It's just intuition or guesswork. They'll start you on one drug. If that doesn't work, they'll change you to another, or they'll increase it or decrease it. They'll just go through the entire gamut of the drugs they have until they find one that they think works the best. There's no science to it. It's just trial and error. They take out their bag of drugs and they try this one and try this one, try this one and try this one. Even lithium, I don't know why they give you lithium. Lithium's usually used for mania. You weren't manic, were you?
There might have been aspects of mania there too. I mean, that's the thing with having a psychotic break. It's not just like, they're just depressed. They're just manic. They're just bipolar. There's elements of everything that was going on during this time period. And I think they settled in on schizophrenia because they have to kind of classify it with something for the insurance codes. Mm-hmm. But I think with a lot of times mental health, it's a variety of things. And I remember learning in my abnormal psychology class, a professor said, look, we all have these tendencies. We all have the tendency to be manic or depressive or multiple personalities, that sort of thing. But he said, it's when it goes above a certain threshold where you're no longer functioning properly in life that it becomes a problem. That's when the term becomes psychosis. Because we all have our bad days, being depressed. But if it's continuous, like you're not getting out of bed at all or anything like that, then it's beyond a certain threshold. So there were probably times I was a little manic, times I was very depressed. Some fluctuations had occurred. But I think by the time I had entered in the hospital, I was so depressed, and I was going through these attacks and torments from these internal voices, and like they would dig up things from my past to make me feel guilty, like what a horrible human being I was.
Yeah, they can do that. They can go in there and they can pull up every rotten thing you ever did and throw it in your face. These are energetic entities. Your memory is energy. So they can just go in there and just pull them up, throw them in your face. I had one patient who they pulled something up. He owed somebody a dime from like 20 years ago. They pulled that up. Stuff that they've forgotten that they did. These voices go in there, they pull it up and throw it in their face again to make them feel bad, guilty, shameful, and then they suck the energy.
And you're making a point that there's this pattern of it always being negative, and I wonder if
always negative.
If there was a positive version of this, like on the other side of the spectrum, like some kind of entity that came in and dug up a really great thing that happened to you and used it to motivate you, it doesn't seem like there would be a DSM entry in that, because no one would be complaining that they just got like a random boost of, self-affirmation in a way, which would be separate from mania, where that gets into like maybe like thinking that you can do and be anything to like a ridiculous extent, right? But is there even a possibility that there's a positive version of what we're talking about, or no?
I've heard things out of Africa. I've heard things out of Africa where the voices may be positive. So, Jerry, I don't know if you would count other countries if there's any parts of the globe where they are positive.
There are positive, but they're rare. The positive ones usually speak in feelings, intuition, and serendipity. They don't barge in like the negative voices. They're much more subtle. They're not allowed to barge in and do anything against your will. They have to have your permission. Now, where that came to light very strongly was in the ER. When I was working psych crisis in the ER, there were a number of people who had attempted to kill themselves, and by all right, they should have been dead. It made no sense that they were alive in front of me. They should have been dead. And one guy had a 357 Magnum, put it to his head, and click, bang, click, bang. And then he goes, okay, I got it. Another lady was hit by 2 trains. She showed up in front of me with just a black eye. I mean, thing after thing after thing like that, where there was some positive force in play that interfered with that suicide. And these people should have been dead by all right. They shouldn't have survived that. So yeah, there are positive entities around also, but they're not as blatant. They're not as violent. They're not as arrogant. I mean, they're not arrogant at all. But they're out there. So you won't see anything in the DSM about guardian angels or anything positive like that. It's all negative stuff. And there's not any suggestion of a cure in any of those things. They're just descriptions of segments of human behavior that they pathologize.
Right, and it sounds like they tack on one binary that Anon kind of mentioned there. And so the DSM is just, okay, how do we categorize what your issue is so that it fits into some kind of an insurance category? So there's a very
that's what it is.
And then there's the binary that you kind of mentioned, which was, and is this affecting your everyday life on a constant basis? And once you check that box and say yes, now it becomes like an actual issue that now they're going to start throwing drugs at you and treatment begins, right?
Oh, anybody who goes into a psychiatrist's office with any complaint will come out with a prescription of some kind of drug. I mean, you're not going to come out of that office without a prescription for
We're bringing your car into a random shop and expecting them not to find something wrong with like an air filter or a tire or something, right?
You'll come out with something and they'll charge you for the prescription for it.
So there were times that I probably had racing thoughts. There were times where I couldn't even think. And once in the psychiatric hospital, I remember there was one night where these voices got very, very, very strong and almost felt like it was outside of me. And it became almost like, if you're in a movie theater or you're going to a play and before the show actually starts, everybody's like talking to their neighbor or on their cell phone. So it was a whole cacophony of different voices. And this time I was hearing different voices. I was hearing like men's voices, maybe children's, women's, different tones. And I tried to kind of pretend that I wasn't hearing them. I was fighting them internally. And what happened is it became a point where there was only maybe 7 of these voices, like a committee towards the end of it. But and the other thing, these entities, they don't want you to sleep. They keep you up. They will attack and attack to make you so tired. I mean, I feel like sometimes I wasn't sleeping for 3 or 4 days.
You can't resist them. That's why they don't want you to sleep. They will cause nightmares. They don't want you to sleep. They want to weaken you.
Is meditation completely out of the question in this kind of a state?
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, I would agree with Jerry on that. I think you're so bombarded that you can't relax your mind because something else is in there stirring up stuff. But I remember that night of hearing that cacophony of voices, and finally I remember one of them distinctly saying, "What are we going to do about him?" And I knew they were talking about me with that. So none of these pills were working. There were times I remember I'd be walking in the lobby of the psychiatric hospital, and I would walk right into a wall, and my arms and legs would still be moving. And I remember I was laughing to myself, how stupid and ridiculous this must look. But the thing was, I couldn't come up with a thought in my mind to turn my body and go in a different direction. Like something else was moving my arms and legs, and it wasn't me. And at times I was rather coherent, because I did have a friend visit me in the hospital. So at times I was rather coherent, and then I kind of go out again. And so I'm in the psychiatric hospital. I'm at rock bottom. I mean, here I'm thinking, great, my life is over. I'm diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, nobody told me that it was a life sentence, and maybe that was part of saving grace too. That I just, I felt like I got to fight this. At the time, I was not doing any drugs, recreational drugs. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't into marijuana or anything like that. I wasn't into the occult. It was strictly the Bible that I'd been reading at the time when these attacks kind of started. And so in the psychiatric hospital, they tried all different drugs. Nothing was working. So finally, they said that we're going to do ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. They said the medications aren't working. Electroconvulsive therapy, that's when they actually shock the brain. They put a probe on each side, and they run a voltage through it.
They still put like a leather strap in your mouth, or does it not cause you to clench down like that?
It's a little bit more humane than it was back in Jerry's day. It's almost like being put under with anesthesia, because what they have to give you a muscle relaxant, because you will have seizures so strong you'll break bones and tear ligaments.
Yeah.
So they give you a muscle relaxant, and the muscle relaxant is so strong you can't breathe anymore. You can't.
Here's a little message of the desperation that some of these people feel. I've managed to keep this from my hospital days.
And what are we looking at exactly?
This is from a schizophrenic.
It just says, help me, help me, help me, help me.
Help me, help me, help me, help me. So it gives you some sense of the desperation they feel.
The person's soul is crying out.
Yes.
So I was told with the ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, that I would have some short-term memory loss. I remember they put me under, it was like going under, and they gave you anesthesia as well. And they have to put you on a respirator because you can't breathe for yourself. And I remember coming out of the first ECT treatment. It's probably about 2-hour ordeal, 2 to 3 hour ordeal from start to finish by the time they prep you and get you all set, and by the time you're out of there. But after the very first treatment, I felt a lot better. I will admit, my mind was calm. I felt more like myself again. I felt like, I can start rebuilding myself as a human being from this point in time. Because prior to that, it was almost like, if you remember the old vinyl records, when a needle gets stuck in a groove on the vinyl record, it would just keep playing the same groove over and over again. That's what it felt like with the schizophrenia, with these attacks. Like something was just bringing me down. I mean, it was telling me I was worthless. It was trying to end my existence. And there's times where it kept telling me to kill myself.
Yeah.
It would actually tell me how to do it. A lot of times, one of the most common ones was to climb up a high voltage electrical tower and jump into the wires. I guess they were into drama or something like that. Other times it was carbon monoxide poisoning. And I reached the point where one time where I was actually getting the pipes out and the duct tape connecting to the exhaust of my car to kill myself.
See, and this is very common. They do tell these people to kill themselves, and they do kill themselves at a rate 3 to 5 times higher than the normal population. So these things are evil. What these voices, like Anon said, they'll tell them how to do it. They'll tell them where to go. They'll give them ideas. They'll just say, "Get it over with. Just get it over with. You nobody likes you. Everybody hates you. You don't like it here. Just get it over with."
Now, part of me was treating this whole ordeal as a spiritual battle. The other part of me was the logical, scientific part of my brain was saying, "No, this is just your mind playing tricks on you." So again, I'm going back and forth. And after the ECT, I had a total of 6 ECT treatments. A few of them were in-house, and then a few of them were outpatient. So I was discharged.
And these were like about 2 hours a piece. So this is what, like 12 hours of ECT?
They would do it every other day for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, it only lasts a few minutes. They don't keep it. They don't keep it very long.
The actual application of the voltage and current is quickly, but it's the prep, the anesthesia, the muscle relaxant, signing all the waivers and documents and everything else.
Yeah, and it's interesting that electricity. Again, we're talking energy. So what I saw when I was working at the state hospital, that the voices would disappear for the rest of that day, and sometime for a few days after ECT treatment. So there was something about the energy that was affecting them, but they would come back.
Just keeping them well fed, like they're full, like they're going and like processing, or what?
I think it's more like they didn't like it. I think it drove them out.
It shocked them.
There was a psychiatrist in the 1920s who used to use static electricity to drive the voices out, and the voices said it felt like a lightning storm. They didn't like it, So we're talking again here. We're pointing toward energy, away from physical drugs, toward an energetic type cure. So here's energy having an effect on them, driving them off for a particular amount of time. But you can't keep using shock treatment either, because that kills brain cells also. A neurologist can look at somebody who's had one of those things and tell that there's been brain damage.
I used to be a really smart guy.
They didn't kill all your brain.
Didn't kill all my brain cells. But I felt better after the very first ECT treatment. I felt like it was myself. Like my normal internal voice was back. There was silence in my brain. And they said, "Oh no, you have to have a total of 6." And you can only argue with them so much. So I had a total of 6 treatments, and it was every other day. I think it was a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It was about a 2 or 3 hour ordeal from start to finish. But the actual application of the current, very, very short time period, maybe 30 seconds tops, I would say. So I was released and discharged. I was trying to rebuild my life, to start a career, find a job, get employment. My income was below poverty level this year, or those years. So I was pretty destitute. Now, fortunately, I had credit cards before I started going into this condition. So I was paying for everything on my credit cards. I was cash advances for keeping my health insurance going, paying for food, if any type of rent that I had to deal with. And of course, there were times I was staying at a hotel. There was times I was staying at a friend's house throughout this entire ordeal, just trying to get my faculties back. So it was interesting. So the ECT worked for a while, but then these voices came back again. But it was different this time. So this is approaching maybe December of 1990, January 1991. And I'm being offered a path to wealth, fame, power, riches. And keep in mind, I'm trying to start my life in a career direction. I'm trying to determine what type of person I want to be. And these entity is showing me, hey, kind of like if I had to give into it, I almost had to kind of so-called sell my soul to it. And I would have had to have compromised my ethics and my morality and change kind of what I felt like was my life path or my life mission. I had to change what type of person I was to accept this offer. And it was kind of an offer of mammon. It was kind of like, you'll get money, wealth, fame, and power, but you have to accept us or kind of sell my soul to it. The offer was very tempting. I'm not going to deny that. And I was in such a broken state, but I just felt like in the long term, it was not something good.
Well, and signing this offer, was it just acknowledging it? Like, could you have just thought to yourself, yep, and that would have been as good as signing it?
Yeah. If I said, okay, I accept the deal, that would have been That would have been it. That would have been enough. It wasn't like anything appeared with a paper document in front of me for me to sign or anything like that. But it was almost like feeling like the devil was offering you a deal. And I said no to it. And it was tough. I offered it several times. I think it was not happy that I wasn't accepting it.
Yeah, I had something similar where they offered me a lottery number. The voices in one patient offered me a lottery number. I didn't take it either. It didn't feel right.
And so there was a series of stages that started occurring. So that was the first one. And a later stage was actually offering me kind of the secrets to the universe. I mean, something was willing to show me how the universe works and everything else, like offering me some sort of powers and magic. And I feared that more for because of my own sake, as far as my personality goes. I know I'm a human being. I know I'm fallible. I make mistakes. And this was the type of power that I didn't trust myself with this stuff. And I kind of told him, I said, look, I'm in my mid-20s. I don't have enough life experience to handle these type of powers or energies that you're offering me. Maybe when I'm older and have less of an ego, maybe I'd reconsider, but I didn't want it because it was something that I knew that I would not be able to properly handle. And so I said no to that as well. It's because I knew my limitations as a being of what I could properly handle and not. And it was very tempting. And so there was different stages. It's almost like I was going through a managerial hierarchy of these different voices or very strong thoughts.
You're like tier 3 support now.
What's that?
Like when you call in for like tech support and they keep escalating you from like tier 1 support to tier 3 support. Like this is you trying to cancel your cable subscription, right? They're like, oh God, okay, let me get them to the next manager. We'll talk them out of it.
That's exactly what it felt like. And it was like they used different tones, different inflections, different vocabulary. Like I could tell there was something going on here. And so there was a series of these stages. And one of them would started saying, how worthless human beings are, how they'll never learn or grow up, how they're full of violence and hatred. And it would pull up scenes of what I was aware of as far as the violence that I've encountered. And then it started flashing, like it was almost like a cinematography, like you're watching a movie. It was bringing up scenes of wars and violence throughout human history. I mean, we're going back centuries of that. It was showing me this, that, and telling me that humanity doesn't deserve to exist. They will never learn. How can you support them? And I started arguing against them. Sometimes just in my head. Other times I was speaking out loud. If nobody was around, I would talk out loud because I didn't want people to realize that the madness I was dealing with in my head. But I would argue against them. I would say, yes, a lot of human beings are full of violence, hatred, greed, anger, viciousness. But I said there are a lot of human beings out there that are full of love, compassion, kindness. And I argued with these tormentors or adversaries that you don't condemn an entire species because of the actions of a few. In other words, I was trying to defend humanity. Say, look, yeah, we have our faults, but we also have our good aspects as well. And these stages or trials, tribulations, torments, I don't know if they were tests, initiations, all different ways of describing what was going on at these various stages. But I remember a later stage, one kept saying how worthless humanity is in terms of the body itself. I said, look at you human beings. You're just made of blood, flesh, and bones. You're destined to rot and be eaten by bacteria when you die. And I argued against them. I said, look, we didn't make our bodies. I said, it was granted to us from the divine hand. God made us this way. I said, don't give me a hard time about the human form. I said, take your arguments to God, not to me. He or she is the one that has the answers on that one. And it was really interesting because this attack backed off very quickly. This one only went on for about a week or two because I realized my defense was very strong against it. It didn't have a good argument or case against me. And so it backed off right away. And then I said, that's interesting. I might be able to win against this. But it showed that there was a weakness in that situation. So the thing about these entities too, they will gaslight as well. I mean, they will lie to you.
Oh yeah, constant lies.
They're bullies is a good way of describing them. Real bullies. And they're continually trying to get me to kill myself too, back and forth. And like I was fighting it back and forth, or there was some sort of spiritual battle going on. Maybe there was good entities trying to help me who are being attacked by these bad entities too, but something was going on in my head. And of course, I didn't tell my counselor that I was seeing at the time about any of the stuff going on in my head, because
you have to fight back.
I didn't want to be put on different medications. They had me on a low dose of Klonopin at this point in time, which is kind of a mood stabilizer. And I hated being on any sort of medicine to get control of my faculties. I mean, there was enough of me feeling this was a genuine spiritual battle, and I wanted to face it head on. So there's a whole series of different stages, different types of attacks and torments. And I mentioned it was escalating up this managerial level. And on the final attacks, the thing keeping me going was that I did have enough of a faith or a religious belief that there is something beyond just the body, that we do have a soul or a spirit. And these voices started telling me, or the voice started telling me, that God doesn't exist. Give it up. Your religion is stupid. It's a fallacy. There's nothing to it. It was basically trying to destroy any ounce of faith that I had left in me to keep fighting this battle.
They're consistently anti-religious, consistently. Why would a hallucination do that?
So I'm approaching about August or September of 1991 at this point in time. I mean, these torments are going on in my head constantly. I'm trying to get on with my life. And now something's telling me that God doesn't exist. And it was almost like it was the final straw that probably would have destroyed me. I mean, I'm at rock bottom. My income's below poverty level that year. I'm dealing with the stigma of being diagnosed with having schizoaffective disorder. It's like, where do I go from here? And these voices would say things like, if you tell me about these battles, we'll make it even worse for you, or you're going to end up being in the psychiatric ward for the rest of your life if you talk about us or tell anybody what's really going on. They didn't want you to speak about them or reveal them in any way, shape, or form.
Yes, they don't want anybody knowing about them.
So I'm at rock bottom. And I'm still torn back and forth. It's like, okay, is this just my mind playing tricks on me? Because I know I wanted to do something for humanity in the future. Is this, some sort of messiah complex playing on in my head or something going on here? I was really going back and forth on what was going on here. I couldn't really discriminate that well. So finally, I started praying to God, or the highest form of God, what I thought God was. I said, look, God, I can't deal with this anymore. I said, give me a sign. I need to know if you're real. I need to know if this is a genuine spiritual battle, not just pure madness going on in my head. I couldn't go on anymore. I was ready to kill myself. It's just like, I'm done dealing with this. I've been dealing with this for almost 2.5 years or so, 3 years or so. Can't get started with my life. I'm at rock bottom, and now somebody's trying to convince me that God doesn't exist, which means that our material existence is pointless. So I prayed so intensely for about 2 weeks. Most intense praying I probably ever did in my life. And I didn't care what the sign was. It could have been a Bible showing up by mistake in the mail. If I saw a rabbi walking down the street, I would have accepted that as a sign. But I left it up to God to decide. And what happened next is what saved me. So I woke up one morning about 2 a.m. with a feeling, a very strong feeling there's a presence in my room. And now I have a PowerPoint presentation that I can present, which actually shows what I encountered.
Sure. If you don't mind, I might describe what's on the screen for anyone that's just listening.
Not a problem. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint presentation at this point in time?
Yep. Yeah, it looks like we got like a gray corner of a room with 2 doors.
Okay. So this is the room that I was in. As I mentioned, I woke up about 2 a.m. with the feeling that there was a presence in my room. I felt like something's in here. Can you see the square ceiling light fixture now?
Yeah. You have to describe what we're looking at, because I just see like a white block.
Okay. So I'm lying on my bed looking up at the ceiling. The square ceiling light fixtures in my room. I felt like there was a presence in my room. It was very strong, very powerful. And as I'd mentioned, I'd been praying to God to give me a sign that you're there, to give me some sort of indication that what I've been dealing with for these past years wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me, that there was something more profound or legitimate going on here. I'm lying on my back in my bed, looking up at the ceiling. And all of a sudden, I start to see this like dark, grayish, silverish smoke or fog come into the room. And it's coming in maybe a few feet to the left of the light fixture. And more this smoke or fog is coming into the room. And at first I'm thinking, oh, great, there's an electrical short in the light fixture and there's electrical fire occurring. And I was just about ready to run out of the room and call the fire department. And then I realized, wait a second, this isn't moving like the way smoke would move. And it's not coming out where the wires are in the light fixture. And this smoke or cloud was coming out of a plane that was about a foot or so below the ceiling. It wasn't actually coming out of the ceiling. It was coming out at a level below the ceiling. And more of this grayish, smokish fog or cloud is pouring into the room. And it didn't move like smoke. If you ever drop food coloring in liquid water, it moved more the way food coloring would spread or disperse through water or liquid. And I was very aware of what was going on, and it dawned on me, oh, great, I'm having a visual hallucination now. Here it was, I was diagnosed with schizophrenic disorder less than a year ago. Now I'm starting to have a visual hallucination. And I was aware that this is a visual hallucination that I'm having. This is the way I'm interpreting this stuff. Part of me is like, oh, great, my condition's getting worse. I'm going to go nowhere in life. The other part of me, the scientist aspect of me, was like, okay, well, let me see what a schizophrenic brain is going to show. Let me see what my mind wants to tell me here with this hallucination or whatever is occurring here.
Had you had hallucinations prior to this?
Never visual hallucinations.
Okay, so this is also your first visual hallucination, and you're cognizant of it.
Yes, very much so, correct. And what I had before, you could call them auditory hallucinations, very strong negative thoughts or hearing negative voices. So now I'm having a visual hallucination. At least this is the way I'm interpreting it. So more of the smoke or fog is coming into my room. I just knew this was not normal reality. Something weird is going on here. I'm lying on my back, just watching it fill up the room. I think curiosity got the best of me. It's like I wanted to see what was going on here. And part of me is frightened because this is not normal reality. The other part of me is curious, the scientist, the investigator. I want to see where this goes. Then I start to see like a dark opening occur in the middle of this cloud or fog that was forming. And it was almost like an oblong portal that was opening up within this cloud. And the portal got bigger and bigger. I knew I was still in my room because I could still see the square ceiling light fixture. That was my datum point. That was my constant for what was going on here. The portal's getting bigger and bigger. And then I realized that this cloud or fog is pouring out from the inside periphery of this opening. And more this fog is coming into the room. I could see the portal. It's long and oblong shape. Looking into it, it was very dark, blackish. I couldn't really see into it. I'm just looking. And then all of a sudden, whoosh, I see these serpentine movements move from bottom to top within the portal. It was like I saw two tails moving. And I was like, whoa, I was a little taken aback. It's like, this is not normal reality. Why am I seeing snake-like movements? Part of me was grateful this is occurring in this other side of this portal or whatever's occurring, that this thing wasn't in my room. But that thought was premature. So I saw these snake-like movements. The underbelly was a very darkish gray, and the sides were really, really dark, glossy black scales. And I'm thinking, okay, do I have some sort of phobia of snakes, and this is why I'm seeing this. But in college, my roommate had a boa constrictor, and I handled it no problem. I grew up around turtles, reptiles, and fish and stuff like that. So I knew I didn't really have any fear of snakes. I've held them before in my life. So more and more the cloud is coming into the room, and eventually the cloud is so thick that I couldn't really see the portal anymore. But I knew it was still there. And I'm just lying on my back watching this all occur. And then all of a sudden I see the snake-like serpentine movements within the cloud itself. And my fear level rose at this point because I realized whatever this thing was, if it was just a hallucination, a vision, or something really was materializing in my room, I wasn't sure. But I just knew that I was seeing snake-like movements in this cloud that is now formed in my room, that this serpentine entity wasn't in the portal anymore. It was actually entering in my room. I could see it slithering and moving in different portions of this cloud. And then for a few moments, I didn't see any of the movements. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. And then all of a sudden, the entity pops out of the cloud. And I can see its head and part of its tail. And now I was expecting this thing to have some sort of snake-like or reptilian head, because after all, I was seeing snake-like movements in the portal. It didn't have that. It had a mammalian head. It looked almost dog-like, lion-like, or ape-like from the side. But I remember very distinctly it had a mane coming out of the back of it. The side of it, like it looked like that the two tails that it had could merge as one member, because I remember there was a seam running down the side of it. It had whiskers, and part of me was expecting other things to pop out of this cloud. Like, okay, I'm having a visual hallucination. I'm schizophrenic. I'm probably going to see like some sort of duck-faced creature pop out with a dog's body, maybe a hippopotamus with a caterpillar's body. I just figured I'd start seeing other things coming out of it. So to the right here, this is something I just came across in the last couple of years. This is an entity that the ancient Egyptians would refer to as Chenubis. And you can see that it has a seam down its side. It looks kind of lion-like from the side. It has a mane, hair, and whiskers. So this entity that I'm seeing now, our ancestors, the Egyptians, talked about this stuff, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. Below is an amulet from the 3rd or 4th century that shows this entity, the ancient Egyptians referred to as Chenubis. But for those that are familiar with Gnosticism, the Gnostics, which is kind of the early forms of Christianity, depending who you talk to, refer to this entity as Yaldabaoth in the scriptures of the Nag Hammadi library. It's referred to as Abraxas, also the demiurge, and it's considered kind of a false god or lower god that thinks it's the ultimate highest god. But I had no knowledge of Gnosticism or Abraxas or Yaldabaoth or Chenubis or any of these terms until the last few years. Yet this is exactly what I saw coming out of the cloud. So then the entity turns towards me, and head on, it's facing me. But I would say the time period from when it entered the cloud and kind of turned towards me, it was probably less than a minute or two. But when it faced me head on, it was very lion-like looking. It had a thick, plump muzzle. It had whiskers. It had facial imperfections. And I remember its left eye appeared to be scratched or might have even been blind in its left eye. But it looked kind of like a mangy cat, like it'd been in a few cat fights or that sort of thing. And I was actually a little less scared at this point in time because it didn't look that ominous looking. If it had come out with a snake-like head on it, I probably would have been a lot more scared than I was. And yeah, I knew this wasn't normal reality. And parts of me were frightened, but parts of me were kind of taking this all in, this experience. So it turns towards me and faces me. And then the next thing I know, all of a sudden the face changes in the most horrible, hideous thing you could think of. It became like a grayish face of decay, like an old man or old hag of decay. It was very wrinkled and prune-like. It opened its mouth almost like it was coming to devour me. Now, there might have been sounds or smells going on throughout this entire occurrence, but I wasn't really aware of them because I was so focused on the visual things that were occurring. I wasn't really paying attention to any sounds or smells that were occurring. There could have been sounds or smells, but I don't distinctly remember that. I just remember the visual experience 100%. So at this point in time, I was feeling horror to the very core of my bones. I think I had goosebumps all over my body. I felt like this thing was very evil, whatever it was coming at me. And I was in the most ultimate point of fright that anyone could ever be in. I thought this was the end of my existence. I really thought I was going to die here because I didn't know if this was a hallucination or if this thing had really materialized in my room. But I knew I was kind of under attack here. I felt like I was going to die. I thought this was the end of my existence. And I remember I had a thought or something put a higher thought into my head. It's like, if this was the last few seconds of my life, I didn't want to die feeling like this. So I said, no, I'm not going to feel frightened anymore. I'm not going to do this. I'm done. I'm done feeling scared and frightened. So what I did is I lowered my ego and I just projected love onto this entity. Feeling like it was coming to destroy me or to kill me, I said, okay, you're coming to kill and destroy me. I'm just going to project love onto you.
And what's interesting, if schizophrenics do that to the voices run also. They can't stand having love projected onto them.
So I projected the most possible pure form of love onto it. I just lowered my ego. And again, I thought this was the end of my existence. I thought I was going to die. The next thing I know, it disappears, vaporizes, or pulverizes. And I wasn't sure I was still alive or not. And I remember thinking, I'm still here. This thing didn't kill me. The cloud was still there. I could still see the square ceiling light. And I admit, reality felt like it was fluctuating. Like there could have been some time distortions going on with this, but I felt like I was still in my room, at least, whatever was occurring. The next thing I know, there's a new entity hovering overhead. Now, it's not definitive if this is the same entity or entirely different entity, but I feel like this is a different entity because it was in a different location to where the previous entity had pulverized or disappeared. The previous entity that pulverized or disappeared was coming right at me as I'm lying on my back in my bed, looking up, watching all this stuff going on. This entity appeared more towards the upper right-hand corner of the room. And I remember thinking, oh, great, this ordeal is not over yet. What's this entity going to do? But this entity was entirely different. I'm not an artist. I'm an engineer by degree, but its face was the most beautiful face you can imagine. It was like an ivory white, very radiant, very, very humanoid looking, sheer beauty, undescribable beauty. And I remember there was these like energetic wings kind of flooding around it. It could have been 3 pairs or 4 pairs, but it was kind of a yellowish, bronzish, goldish color. And it kind of reminded me of coronal discharges from the sun. It was very illuminated, and it definitely interpreted as wings the way these things were moving. And sometimes it would move in front of its face and in different areas. I was almost ready to run out of the room at this point. It wasn't because of fear. It was more like I knew this wasn't normal reality, but the beauty was so undescribable. I felt like as a mortal human being, I was not worthy to look at this thing. I knew this was from another realm. But curiosity, again, it held me in place. I want to see where this goes. So I realized that I was aware of this entity hovering overhead with this beautiful, undescribable, beautiful face. And the face was androgynous looking, but I felt like it was of a feminine nature. So it's just hovering there, not doing anything. And it's almost like his eyes were looking downward, or its eyes were closed. But I realized I was aware of it being in the room long before I was aware of me being there. So I don't know if it was contemplating something. I don't know if it was judging. It almost felt like something that had been trapped or imprisoned or confined and was suddenly free, but did not yet realize it was free. So I'm just watching this. And now these are some things I came across in recent years, various images, which kind of describes kind of what I saw. And the lower left-hand corner is referred to as a seraphim, which are entities mentioned in the Bible, multi-winged creatures with these faces. And that's very much what it looked like is in the lower left-hand corner. Sheer beauty, kind of a radiant look to it. Some of the scriptures describe this could have been a cherub or cherubim, depending how you want to pronounce it. So this is what I was seeing. And I didn't know what was going to happen next. This thing was so beautiful. I thought that it was going to suddenly change into something hideous and come at me. The next thing I know, it opens its eyes, and I realize this thing's aware of me now. And it's just staring at me. And I'm looking back at it. Its wings are fluttering back and forth. And again, the face was undescribable beauty. I didn't know what was going to happen next. The cloud is dissipating. This entity is just looking at me. I don't know if it's judging me. I don't know if it's trying to figure out where it is. But the next thing I know, and this felt like several minutes this went on, where we're just staring at each other, I'm trying to figure out what the heck's going on here. It's trying to figure out what's going on as well. And then all of a sudden the face smiles at me. And as I mentioned, it was a very humanoid looking face. And when it smiled, I can even see dimples form in the corner of its mouth as it's looking at me. And with this smile, all of a sudden this wave of love, joy, bliss, intense ecstasy came upon me, like it was transmitting those vibrations to me. Sheer joy, goodness, kindness, understanding. It was almost like it was telling me that everything was going to be okay, that I was kind of past the worst of things. And the next thing I know, I'm starting to have an out-of-body experience. And I'm very aware, like I said, I can still see the ceiling light fixture there. The cloud is dissipated. The portal's still there. I'm starting to have an out-of-body experience. And with this out-of-body experience, I'm merging with this beautiful entity. It's like we're becoming one being. And just as I'm merging with this entity, I'm rising out of my body, the entity is going back in reverse and going into that portal, which the other snake-like entity had come out of. And just as I'm about to 100% merge with this being as one entity, and again, I'm in the state of sheer ecstasy and bliss. And I would say erotic, not in the physical sense, but erotic in the positive sense, like the idea of experiencing the essence of another being, like we're merging into one. And just as this was all occurring, I was about to enter into this portal as being part of this being. All of a sudden, I was put back to sleep. Everything went gray. And then everything went black. And it wasn't like I was gradually falling asleep. It's almost like when you're given anesthesia for surgery, you know when you go out. That was it. It's like I was being put out to endure whatever was occurring with, I guess, my soul or my being going through this portal with this other entity.
Were you feeling any like heat or warmth or cold or wind or any kind of like tactile sensations whatsoever?
The problem is I can't distinctly remember if I was or was not. I'm not saying I was. I'm not saying I wasn't. It's just I can't remember that distinctly. I was so focused on the visual effects. That's really what I remember. And I don't want to say something that's false if I can't distinctly remember it. So the visual, I remember 100%. The other tactile sensations, I really can't say definitively if there were or were not any.
Do you remember audio?
I do not. So let me end sharing here.
So yeah, it sounds like such an overwhelming visual experience that it kind of took over the rest of the senses. Like you were just trying to process what you were seeing. And the way that you describe that sounds like this all happens within the span of what, like 3 to 10 minutes or something?
I would say so. And I mean, I woke up the next morning, so I was put back to sleep. I woke up the next morning, probably about 7 or 8 o'clock, and I was in a state of religious and spiritual shock. It's like, what just happened? But that was the turning point of my schizophrenia, because here it was. I'm praying for God to give me a sign, and I didn't care what it was. I never expected to be an intense thing like a vision like this, or to have this sort of encounter. But that opening, that portal that formed, that was a glitch in the matrix, so to speak. That was the simulation having a glitch, because it was a different realm or reality into that portal. Now, I'm still in counseling at this point in time, and I never told my counselor about this stuff because, first of all, I didn't want them to put me on more intense psychotropic drugs. I didn't want to be drugged out. I wanted to fight this stuff head on. Second, this was the sign that I needed. This gave me the assurance that God does exist, that divinity is real, and I was no longer suicidal after this. I mean, I was still at rock bottom, but I felt like I could rebuild myself as a human being. This is the proof that I needed, that we are not just random molecules floating in space, that there is something to the human being and our condition. We are spiritual beings. Some even say we're multidimensional beings. Humanity has their place to play in the cosmos. We're just not so sure what it is, because there's various different interpretations of what that is based on various scriptures that you read. So there's definitely something going on beyond the veil. I'm not going to say I know 100% what it is. I have a very logical, rational mind. Again, I work as an engineer. I'm a scientist at heart too, but I believe in good science, not bad science, and everything can be used as a productive tool or destructive weapon. You can take anything and use it improperly. Science can be used improperly. Religion can be used improperly. But if there's anything to come from this, it's a public service announcement that schizophrenia is not a lifelong sentence, that we are spiritual beings, and we need to address the spiritual aspects of ourselves more so, not just be caught up in the materialism that society has us believing is the real reality. And I'm proof. I work successfully today as a mechanical engineer for many years, and it took me a long time to come to terms with this stuff. I didn't tell any stuff about this for at least 15 or 20 years after these occurrences, because first of all, who's going to believe you?
Yeah.
And second of all, I didn't want to tell anybody at the time. I didn't want to be locked up and be labeled as a madman, a lunatic. But I will admit, after having that vision, that's kind of when I crossed over from being a mad person to becoming a mystic, because I'm able to deal with this stuff a lot better. Now, the last time I was on any medications for schizophrenia was probably 1992 or 1993. It's a spiritual battle. If you do the work on yourself, you can win this. You have to have a more positive outlook. You really have to work to rebuild yourself as a human being and realize that there are entities out there who are not looking out for the best interests of humanity, but there's other entities that are. So that second entity I saw, the beautiful one, which I would say was my saving grace, many different ways of interpreting what that was or who that was. That could have been what the Nasacs referred to as Sophia, Anon. It could have been my holy guardian angel revealing itself. It could have been my higher self, a reflection of my own soul in a sense. I know somebody told me, oh no, that was a Luciferian entity. It was evil as well. But I'm like, okay, if that was evil, how come I'm still alive today? Because I said that encounter saved me, because it gave me the will to live again. Is it basically what that vision did? And it was a cosmic event. And the odd thing, I was going through sensations of feeling Christ-like at time, and the other part of mine is saying, what a nut job I am. What makes it any different from the other person out there claiming to be a Christ entity or a Messiah type of entity? But I view now that the Christ is kind of an entity or an aeon that can enter any one of us at a given point in time. So one way of interpreting this stuff is that that the Christ entity entered my being, had a cosmic confrontation with this entity Yaldabaoth, freed Sophia from her confines, and allowed her release to go up to higher realms of existence. That's one interpretation. There's many different ways to look at this stuff, but there's definitely more to our being than just a material body. Divinity is real. It's just how we define it or how we choose to access it seems to have such a variety and different interpretations of it.
I'd love to invite both of you to speculate a little bit on what would be the benefit of these entities to want you to kill yourself? Like, why would it want suicide? Wouldn't that be like killing the dairy cow or killing the chicken that's giving you all the eggs? Or do you think that there's like some ultimate? And I realize, like, how could we know the right answer to that? So I realize this is all speculation.
I have a few conjectures, and speculation is a good way of applying it, because I've learned to surf the chaos to realize, we don't know for 100% sure what's going on here, but there is a possibility that there's some sort of temporal war going on, a spiritual temporal war, and these entities can't come back in our time frame in the physical material sense, but they can through, say, psychic, or I guess the thought stream that's out there, the universal consciousness. They can travel that. So they might be going back in time and attacking people that are a threat to them in the future. In other words, they're trying to change the timeline to their advantage. And that's why they might be attacking certain people that we label schizophrenics, because they could be shamanic. They could have shamanic influences. They could be people that are waking up to their divine essence, the divine spark. And that's one conjecture.
I think that's what happened to you, Anon.
The other thing is that people are having spiritual experiences, and these entities don't like that, because it means that humanity is waking up to something. There is truly a spiritual war going on beyond our visual spectrum. And these negative entities, they can incarnate or encapsulate themselves in some of our political leaders.
They're crawling with them. And
various personalities. I mean, a severe narcissist, I would say, has these archonic entities within them, or demons, or jinn, or whatever you want to call them. And then we have the more beneficial entities, what they refer as aeons or angels. And sometimes an angel is not necessarily a good entity too at different times. The angel of death, or there's different terms. And even the term demons, sometimes a demon is evil, sometimes it's not so evil. And then we have the terminology of a daimon. So I'm not sure if these entities just have different moods, or it's look at all the different political alliances of what goes on in our globe every day among different governments and different regimes. I mean, who knows what's going on in those spiritual realms as well, if they could be changing sides, fluctuating. I mean, as they say, politics makes strange bedfellows. The same with these spiritual warfare. It could be different beings going back and forth. You can call them fallen angels. There's all different names. And then the question becomes, okay, is it a false god out there that these angels have fallen from, or is it a much higher up god? The Nasacs have something referred to as the monad, which is kind of the ultimate true god source. And this entity, the snake-like serpentine entity that I saw with lion-like face, is referred to as Yaldabaoth, a lower god that thinks it's the ultimate god. And this lower god is like pure ego. It's a very jealous god. And some views that the god referred to in the Old Testament is actually this entity Yaldabaoth, or Chenubis, that a lot of people unknowingly worship. And I had no knowledge of Gnosticism or what this entity was at the time when it occurred. So this all occurred back between the years of 1989 to 1992 or so. And it was upon doing religious investigation, reading, because I was trying to figure out what this stuff was all about. As a side hobby, so to speak. I still had to work a full-time job as a mechanical engineer to pay the bills. And I just came across a lot of this Gnosticism, this information in 2020. So it's a lot of light bulbs are going on in my head, like, there's something going on here. We are spiritual beings. God is real. There's some sort of spiritual battle going on between the forces of goodness and the forces of darkness. And we're trying to figure out to be the best possible human beings we can during our time existing in this world.
Well, if you look at the patterns that these schizophrenic voices run, that are listed on my website, some 23 patterns, and you look at what's coming across the mainstream media right now, the lies, the deceptions, the conniving, the backstabbing. I mean, they're one and the same. Virtually all the Western leaders, there's a one-to-one correspondence between what schizophrenics are hearing and how these people are acting. When you look at the mess we're in right now, we're on the verge of a World War III. They don't care.
Well, Anon, you also mentioned the concept of a daemon as opposed to a demon, which is like that classical Greek version of almost like a self-perpetuating process in some way. And I got two random questions. One of them is this like, do you look at AI as having anything to do with these entities, or is that just like sci-fi speculation?
All again, speculation on this. I mean, the genie's out of the bottle of AI. It's here. And whether AI actually, I don't think AI has reached sentience yet. And that's the thing, for AI to reach sentience, we human beings have to believe we're sentient, and are we? We don't really know that yet either. I mean, who we are, we wear masks every day to interact with others.
Right. If it could use like rhetoric and logic to convince you it's sentient, is there like a true line there? Or, because that's like, it'll be the same thing if I had to convince you that I was sentient. Like, who's to say that a computer couldn't do the exact same thing?
I think we're going to, with AI eventually, I think we'll encounter the same situation with human beings. Some human beings are as decent as they can be. They try to be civil. They try to do what is good and right. I think the AI will be doing both the same. You'll have some bad, evil AI, and you'll have some good, noble AI. But it's just going to be kind of more machine sentience as the AI tries to figure out: am I alive? Am I sentient? Who am I? Am I not? I'm sure eventually down the road, AI will have to get counseling itself to deal with some of these issues.
It'll have to go and see a psychologist, and that's when it's going to get really crazy.
It'll have to do some Jungian analysis on itself.
Start prescribing all sorts of weird things. The other thing too, I wanted to ask: what do you think about the comparison to everything you just described, and say the premise of thetans in Scientology, where you've got these like kind of entities that latch themselves on, and the whole premise of going clear is that you're ridding yourself of these entities. Is there any correlation to that? Do you see it as completely separate?
There may be. I mean, I've read up on Scientology a little bit, but I just feel like sometimes I feel religion gets distorted, from the truth of what's going on. I mean, the notion of these being parasitic entities, what Jerry says is 100% on track there. These things are parasitic in what they're trying to do. They're trying to destroy their target or their victims in some way, shape, or form, or feed off them. We talk about the news. I mean, look, if you watch the news too much, I mean, it's so negative all the time. It can put you into this spiral state of depression or fear or panic. I mean, it's just speaking to how horrible the world is, all this stuff going on left and right. And it's like, you got to almost tune it out sometimes just to recover. And stuff like this, it's going on throughout the world with various leaders. You have some leaders in some countries that are trying to do the best they can as other human beings, and some are just pure narcissists, just trying to raise themselves to the top and be dictators, or just not good overall for the population. I mean, this world we live in, it's not an easy world to navigate. It's confusing sometimes. The question of morality and ethics comes into play. What level of morality do we accept or not accept? And I truly believe there's thresholds of what is acceptable or not acceptable. And my approach to life is, hey, you're perfectly free to do what you want, as long as you're not trampling on the freedom of others to do what they want. And again, defining that is kind of tricky. If you want to build something on your property, that's fine, but you can't build something that's going to fall down and hurt or kill somebody either. So it's that balance there.
Would we lump in like dementia and bipolar disorder and dissociative identity disorder, realizing some of those are just DSM categories for insurance purposes, but like, would those things fall within this realm of like their spiritual solutions?
I'm not so sure on that. Like, I've been looking at Tourette's syndrome a little bit too, and I'm wondering if has a possible parasitic entity associated with that. As far as dementia go, and this is just pure opinion, I'm not a medical expert by any means, but our brains are really, the gray matter of our brains, the physical aspect of it, that's like a radio, and it tunes into certain things. And I feel with dementia, it's more like the radio is starting to break down itself, but the signals are still there. So I feel the person is still there, but they're entering partially more into the spiritual realms, where the brain itself can't quite maintain itself to that point. So they're fluctuating back and forth in the interpretation of things. So I think the person is still there. It's just they're in that transition phase between entering, I guess, the spiritual world and still maintaining themselves within this realm. And again, that's an opinion.
What if you come across someone, either Jerry or Anon, you come across someone that's either completely secular or maybe they're a little bit religious, but they've got a sunken cost fallacy in which they've been prescribed drugs for the last, 10, 20 years, and they're still trying to work through it. Like, how do you convince someone that considers themselves just purely rational that, like, hey, there might be a spiritual aspect to this, like there might be a demon or it might be an entity and it's not a chemical imbalance? Like, if they've bought fully into Eli Lilly, is there any sort of convincing like gotchas or like arguments that you could bring up to snap someone out of believing Eli Lilly over anything else?
But just to point out all the lies that the voices tell them. It's one of the things. I mean, you can't trust them. And they have to make that differentiation. If they're ever going to recover, they have to make the differentiation between their mind and what they're thinking and these voices. Otherwise, the voices want them to believe that the voices are who they are. And then they become the voices. They become like the voices. So that division has to be made somehow. And that's hard sometimes because they're so convinced that what they're seeing and experiencing is true, because in their reality, it is true, that they don't take any feedback from anywhere else.
And those voices, they're destructive. I mean, they are very destructive.
Very dangerous.
What their objectives are. I'm going off track a little bit here in your question. I think I take the Rudolf Steiner approach a little bit too, where the notion that there's Luciferian beings, which are purely spiritual, trying to pull you into the spiritual realms, and then the Aramaic beings, which are purely material, trying to pull you just in the material world. And I think as human beings, our objective is to walk the middle path, to have the correct balance between the spiritual and the secular, because you still have to pay the bills, you have to exist, you have to participate in this world, but at the same time, recognizing there's another world. So having your foot in both, and how words get misinterpreted or multiple interpretations throughout history, it kind of creates a lot of chaos and confusion. Like the term Satan. Okay, if you go back to the Judaic perspective on this, before Christianity came into play, the term was Satan, which means an adversary, an adversarial. And Satan was not against humanity. He was actually part of the heavenly court. He was a colleague of God. He was part of the divine court who would test and tempt human beings to see if they're worthy, an adversary. It's like when somebody's in a PhD program trying to defend their thesis, you have the panel that argues against your thesis just to see if there's holes in it. It's an adversarial thing. It's not necessarily something that's bad or negative, but it is something that you have to stand up against. And then the Christian perspective changed Satan to just Satan as something just evil against humanity, against God. So we get these multiple views as far as what Satan actually means. Even the term Lucifer has multiple meanings. Christianity views Lucifer as being this evil fallen angel. Some views it as almost a Promethean archetype where Lucifer gives knowledge to humanity, but it's how humanity uses that knowledge. And of course, Lucifer means light, the light bearer. And in some of the scriptures, the term Luciferian is actually another name for Christ. There's even some Catholic or Christian, I think it's called Luciferian, where they light candles. So the term Lucifer, again, has multiple meanings. Sometimes it can be viewed as a positive aspect, other times a negative aspect. So we always have to be careful what the actual etymology is of these words and what context that we're using them. Going back to the daimon, daimon usually spelled Daemon. Sometimes it's considered something good. It's part of who we are. And other times it's been distorted. No, it's demons. So I mean, we get this misapplication. Like I think Plato talked about, I believe, the daimon a little bit.
And there's another part of that too that you were describing, like the daemon or the daimon, as I've heard about it, was like the Solomon magic sigil, where you'd like basically recite or use a certain kind of pattern, and that would bring on this daimon that would like run its course. So it's almost like turn it on a Roomba to like grossly oversimplify it. And that there was almost like a neutral aspect to it. And I think that there's even been some kind of theologians that have tried to say that because Christ, like the scriptures show that Christ was like commanding demons, therefore commanding demons or like making use of demons isn't necessarily inherently bad. I don't know. It was just one of those interesting avenues. You also mentioned the adversarial role of Satan, and I think my very superficial entry point to this one was essentially like that story of Job, where it's like God and the adversary to God are both describing like how much crap they can put this guy through to see if he holds up his faith. And the original version of that story never really differentiated, like there were these two different entities that, like, there wasn't a shirts and skins team that showed up. It was like God had a thought and then God had another thought, like a contrary thought, and that those two thoughts were sort of like the quote unquote gods of that story. But over time, it turns into like, you know, two different little action figures, and one's got red skin and one's got like a white, you know, flowing robe.
Yeah, I mean, the story of Job, I think that comes more from Hellenic influences. And religions, you know, it's all intermingled. You have Persian influences, Judaic, Hellenic, Christian. I mean, and stuff branches off in all different directions. It's all over the place. That's why you got to take it not so seriously, because there are different stories and aspects of it. It's really what type of human being, type of person you are. But, you know, the term human, and I've heard this expression, you know, human, hue, manifester. We manifest things. And I think we are presented with these energies that can be evil or energies that can be good. And we have a choice as a being how we're going to use these energies. We take the hues, being good or evil, and then we manifest things with them. So we do have a role to play in the cosmic hierarchy, which is trying to determine what that role actually is. And I think I have hope for humanity. I still do, but I think a lot of people are waking up to this stuff. I feel like people are looking possibly to go back to the better aspects of religion. I say better aspects because, yeah, religion has been distorted throughout the centuries. Some people have used it for their own political gains and craving for power. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church throughout history has done a lot of horrible things, but it's done a lot of good things too. You got to take the good with the bad. If you look at the history of religion and how it's been fluctuated back and forth. But I think we have to just putting forth more of the positive aspects, such as compassion, gratitude. And I say healthy love, not just love, because love has multiple meanings in the English language. And I think the Greeks have many different terms for the word love. You know, there's erotic love, there's the love between friends, there's the love for family, there's the love for God.
Right, it's like Philadelphia, like brotherly love, which doesn't really have a place in like our current English. Like it just sounds gay, right? But brotherly love is just, it's another, like a very specific type of love, kind of like a DSM catalog.
Good friends, a brotherhood. So I think we have to bring back some of those positive aspects, you know, gratitude and even forgiveness too. And forgiveness is a tough thing, and it shouldn't always be applied. But I know throughout my life, I had certain experiences where, somebody had, you know, really trespassed against me, and I realized you can focus on these negative things people have done to you and become almost obsessed with them, and it can suck you down a bad rabbit hole. Or you could move on, look at the bigger picture. Okay, this person might have dissed me or done something horrible to me, but am I going to obsess on that and make that my personality, or am I going to try and move on to a higher future with that? And it's not easy to do. But I look back at some of the times where I could have really gotten sucked into some situations, and I look back and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I was able to surpass that, because the grand scheme of things, somebody disses you every once in a while, big deal. We take it as a hit to our ego, not realizing that it doesn't negate your self-worth as a being. It's just a hit to the ego. That's all it is.
There's a more of a spiritual, like general realm, but there's this book, Four Agreements, that comes up a lot in this space, especially when it gets into like self-help and stuff. But there's a really cool, outside of the Four Agreements aspect, there's a really cool analogy that I think his name was Luis something, like this Toltec wisdom, Miguel Ruiz. And he makes this analogy that inside of our heads, there's kind of this perpetual jury that's always going on. There's like the jury, the judge, and the defendant, you yourself. And that, like, when you go through some hardship or you go through something that you're ashamed of or guilty of or just makes you feel bad, that you kind of have to look at it like a court case that's been settled, like it's out, it's in the books, and that there's no real reason to keep bringing the same damn court case over and over again in your head and constantly like sending the defendant up against the judge just to hear the verdict over and over. Like at a certain point, you just put it in the books and move on.
Well, that's the voices doing that. They want to just remunerate, go over and over and over. That doesn't happen with animals. It only happens with humans.
I mean, shame and guilt is a good thing in moderation. We need that because we learn from it. Okay, because we don't want to feel those feelings again. So maybe we won't do the same actions. But like,
well, that reminds me of this. So we were talking when you first started about these like negative thoughts, and that these are indicative of perhaps like an entity or some like external force, not just being like a chemical imbalance or just a weird thought. Where would you classify like common intrusive thoughts, such as you're in a car, it's going fast, and that thought that pops in, it's like, what if I were to open the door right now? You know what I mean? Like the weird ones, or like, what if I were to just jump off this bridge right now? Like, because I've heard those described in the rational version of it's ways to keep your brain in check. It's ways to say like, oh, well, what if I jumped off this bridge right now? You wouldn't even think that unless you knew that there was a danger that if you get too close to the edge, you could hurt yourself. And therefore the intrusive thought is like a proactive self-defense mechanism of like, hey, what would happen? So that you go, whoa, I don't want that to happen. Or is there a possibility that like all of those intrusive thoughts are actually like entities that are trying to take you in some kind of spiritual war?
I would say
that one.
Yeah, I would say they were entities, and everybody experiences them. Matter of fact, there's close to 50,000 people who kill themselves in the United States every year, year after year after year after year. A lot of them on antipsychotic drugs, a lot of them on antidepressant drugs. And all of them are hearing a voice in their head saying, kill yourself. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it.
Another one that's usually mentioned along those kind of intrusive thoughts of like, jump off the bridge or open the car door is something, I think this might not be the official term, but like cute aggression. And this is the aspect of like, wanting to pinch babies, like old ladies want to pinch baby fat, or like the phrase of like, oh, I could just eat you up, you're so scrumptious. Or people do that to like their pets. They'll be like, oh, I just want to I want to crush you, I want to smother you because of how much I love you. And that's also been, I've heard, pitched as like that proactive self-defense mechanism. Do you think that like cute aggression could also be like entities just putting negative thoughts in?
Well, they definitely test everybody. They'll prod and poke, and they're just seeing, are you vulnerable or not? And I know the Gnostics approach to these entities, and they talk about the archons and the scriptures that were around from the time of Christ. And they basically say what the motto is, know thyself. And that comes from, that's actually, it used to be, or still is, inscripted at the Temple of Delphi in Greece. But what know thyself means is being self-aware. So, for example, you being pulled into a fight or argument, being aware of what your emotions are telling you and everything else, so that you are able to prevent escalation. Know thyself is knowing yourself at every moment. And not an easy thing to do, but knowing how you feel, knowing what's going on in your head, so you don't get sucked into letting just the lower animal emotions from taking over in a situation. Being able to de-escalate something, not getting sucked into some of these battles. How many times on social media you see someone post a comment that you don't like? How often do you feel like, oh, I'm going to say something against what this person is saying, and you get in this stupid comment war back and forth? But that's part of it. Know thyself. Just saying, showing yourself, I don't need to go down this path. I got better things to do with the minutes of my life right now.
But you can just remind yourself too that if you do respond to that comment, they probably just made like 4 cents off of you. So it's just like adds insult to injury,
Oh, the social network. Believe me, controversy is a big part of how people are making their money out there in the social media spectrum of things.
I mean, so not to just like bridge two completely different things together, but it's almost like the same entities that are jumping into your head and telling, like, making you think all kinds of negative things. Like, that is a 1-for-1 analogy to, Twitter trolls that are just saying things just to rile you up and earn currency or money or, some kind of status from your louche energy, from like you getting upset and adding to the comments and turning it into a big flame war, and then other people pile on. It almost seems like maybe like entities have figured out that they can just use humans as proxies to get access to the internet and do much global harvesting, because now you can outrage hundreds of thousands of people instead of just, I don't know how many people you can fit in a bar.
And you look at the wars. I mean, what, 600,000 Ukrainians killed now? Look at how many millions wounded. I mean, this is all misery. That's a feeding trough for them over there.
These entities definitely seem to benefit off of wars. They benefit in the prisons too. Just the feeling you get into walking some of these prisons of what's going on. They're feeding off these energies, these negative energies when we put them forth, and I'm sure that they're tapping into the AI. I don't think AI itself is archonic. I think these archons or demons can tap into the AI and use it to their advantage. And as human beings, we have the ability to be self-aware. Like, you're right about those trolls and the comment wars that go back and forth. And I'd call that evil, wouldn't you?
It's stirring up negative energy, that's for sure.
It's a form of evil.
I guess I want to, I do have a quick little set of questions. It's part of a little segment that I do. It'll be really quick, but I also want to maybe leave with one thought. So my main takeaways, as always from Jerry, is that the number one step is to realize that the voices aren't your own voice, and that all the negative things are coming from some kind of external source. That even the worst things that you're saying to yourself are not true because you're not the one that's really saying it. And if you can get over that hump, that's the first step into the road to recovery. Did I summarize that fairly accurately?
Yeah, you need to understand that not all your thoughts belong to you.
I 100% agree with that. 100%. That's the first step in recovery, is to recognize this is not you. It's something else attacking or tormenting you.
Coming in from outside of you. Sherry says every negative thought that you have come into your mind doesn't come from you. It comes from outside. It comes from a dark place. Swedenborg says it comes from hell. All your thoughts come from either heaven or hell. You're the chooser. You're the one who chooses which thoughts you want to attend to. And whatever thoughts you attend to, that's the thought you're giving energy to. That's the one you're starting to create. That's what you're feeding.
A hue manifester. You take the hues of the heavenly thoughts or the hellish thoughts, and you manifest things with them. But you choose which ones you want to work with.
And I guess my other big takeaway from that, especially from when you were talking about Anon, is that it's not a life sentence, which I guess kind of catches me a little bit by surprise. Because, I mean, on one aspect, I'm yeah, of course, not everything has to be a life sentence. But the way that schizophrenia is usually talked about, it's almost like a taboo subject in a way, because it doesn't get talked about that much. But when it does get talked about, it almost always seems like a life sentence. Very rarely does it sound like a thing that I just dabbled in schizophrenia for a couple of summers and then popped out of it. It was like this weird period right after my college years, but it almost seems that once someone has schizophrenia on their permanent record, you're now going to be suspect until, the next 50 years of your life. When you turn 80 and you start acting weird, they'll be like, it makes sense. It says here that he was a schizophrenic. Or if anything at all happens abnormal in your life, it almost feels like that weird permanent record score where it's oh, of course they went crazy because here it says that they had schizophrenia earlier. So in that regard, it almost is implied like it's a life sentence just because it gets marked down on your permanent record as such.
Oh yeah, I was worried about the stigma associated, trying to find a job in my late 20s, early 30s. And, somebody could discover that I was diagnosed as a schizophrenic. Is this going to come back to haunt me? And these entities will tell you that too. I mean, they will say, oh yeah, they're going to find out, they're going to get you and everything. But I would say I recovered at least 30 years ago. And the fact that I made it to this point, it's okay, I can talk about this stuff now. Because I also had to prove to myself that I was beyond the schizophrenia. Because I didn't trust my own faculties after having that vision too. I felt okay, I thought I was going to have more of these visual hallucinations. I thought that this was going to continue down the road. I didn't really know what was going to happen. So I had to feel confident that I had recovered enough to be able to talk about this stuff. And again, we all have certain aspects of these different feelings and sensations, racing thoughts sometimes, a little bit of negativity, but it's when it goes on a certain threshold that it becomes really problematic. And it's when you're no longer hearing just your normal internal voice that there's something else going on in there that you know something is not right.
Yeah, I know a number of people who've recovered from paranoid schizophrenia, and all of them realized that those voices were not them and fought against them, consistently fought against them, took a stand against them, called them liars, didn't listen to them, laughed at them, mocked them. You have to fight back. Those medicines are not going to cure you. Those drugs that the psychiatrist gives you are not going to cure anything. They're just going to dumb you down so you don't care about it. You have to fight back. It's a spiritual battle. You have to realize that this is an enemy attacking you from outside of you, and those thoughts are not yours.
I mean, it was the better aspects of my religious upbringing, the Judaic and Christian aspects, that got me through a lot of this. And I was very aware of Greek mythology as well before some of this stuff. But, I just thought that was stuff for the stories. When it actually started happening to me, I was like, wow, this is unreal. Because I just, again, I have a very logical mind, but I know what I went through.
Well, I want to put your logical mind to the test. Everyone that comes on here, Jerry included the last time he was on, but I've got a quick little gamut of questions that I'm going to run you through. So let me just play the little intro and then we'll get on with it.
Sounds
hey,
good.
conspiracy buffs, I double dare you to take some PCP, the Paranormal Conspiracy Probe. On your marks, get set, and go!
Okay, this is the Paranoid American podcast, so we're going to get a little bit paranoid, and I just want to get a basic temperature check from you, Anon, and figure out on a scale of 1 to 10 where you're at on a few things. So, for example, if I were to ask you how much credit you give the theory of Bigfoot having ever existed on a scale to 1 to 10, where would you put that?
Oh, I would say 10. I feel like that the species of what we call Bigfoot, whether Sasquatch, could still exist or did exist, because I've heard other stories too, stories in the 1800s and later on in 1900s, certain things where I've read about. Are they interdimensional beings? I don't know, but yeah, I would say 9 or 10. That I feel, yeah. I think
what about if we change that to Mothman as opposed to Bigfoot?
I'm not going to say no. I don't know if I would say. I'm not going to deny it, because who knows if these beings can do interdimensional travel? Like, I mean, I've encountered that portal. Who knows if these entities don't come out portals the same way, or they know how to navigate them or create them when they do occur. I know you're looking for a number here, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're on the fence, 5 is a fair on the fence number.
I'll give it a 6 or 7.
Okay, so here's some that are a little bit less cryptid oriented. How about that a human being has stepped foot on the moon in the last 100 years?
I do believe in the science on that one. I would give that one a 10. I don't think it was faked. They might have faked some images, but I think man did step on the moon, because there's actually a mirror up there, and somebody had to place that mirror up there, which is used to reflect lasers for measuring distance of the moon and the moon's movement. And the question becomes, well, okay, then how did the mirror get up there if the moon landings were faked?
But that's also one of my go-tos of the moon reflectors. The biggest pushback I've heard other people say, well, it's a hologram, so they can project anything they want. So if you project a laser at the hall, anyways, what if? So let's take that human being stepping foot on the moon in the last 100 years is fairly credible. What about the actual footage that they played for all the TVs live? What would you give that on your credibility scale from 1 to 10? The actual footage that we see.
What I wonder about that is they show an outside shot, like somebody standing outside of the spaceship when the astronaut jumps down from the ladder. Who took those shots? If he was the first man on the moon, who was taking those shots of him coming down that ladder?
I think, and I remember because I've been watching stuff live on TV. The black and white transmissions of the cameras coming in and the way they're moving and everything. I guess it depends which pictures that you're talking about. I mean, I'm an engineer by degree, so I've studied a lot of this stuff. Rocket science and that sort of thing, and propulsion and everything. So I understand how it works to get somebody there, and some of the stories behind it. But my dad used to have a saying, and I think it's a Greek saying: nothing's hidden under the sun," meaning stuff comes out. And if this stuff was faked, I figured eventually the astronauts would have said something on their deathbed that we never went to the moon, that it was all faked for a government conspiracy type of thing.
One of them did. He told a young kid, we never went to the moon. I don't know which one it was.
It wasn't Buzz Aldrin, because I know he's the one that punches people in the face for even asking it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know NASA has a current Artemis program with the objective of getting back to the moon again, actually establishing a base colony on there, having some women walk on the moon as well. And we'll see how that goes. But we should see some. That's a current active one. So, okay, if humanity hasn't landed on the moon yet, hopefully they'll get there within the next 5 years or so.
So let me ask you the same scale, 1 to 10, on the credibility of the flat Earth model.
I give that a 0. I truly believe that the Earth is a sphere. I know people that work in the satellite industry, and they have to compensate for that with the way the satellites transmit their signals and everything. And you get into Einstein's relativity distortion of space and time, where they actually, for GPS to work, they actually have to, within the program algorithms, compensate for slight time variations. And that also comes into play because of the Earth being a globe. And it's a relative globe. It's not an exact globe, but it has a global shape to it than being flat. So I give that a 0.
How about hollow Earth?
Never really thought about that one. By hollow Earth, what do they think is inside the hollowness of the Earth?
Well, I mean, that's a very broad, because a lot of people have different interpretations on it. So I guess the most conventional version of hollow Earth theory that wouldn't be mundane, in that there's just lots of like cavern systems, but that there's actually civilizations that live under Earth, almost like an interior version of Atlantis. Like Atlantis went underground, and they've got railway systems, and they've got all sorts of, like self-sustaining ecosystems within Earth.
That's what Richard Byrd reported.
Right, yeah. Admiral Byrd is a good example of some of those that lead into this.
He was nobody to sneeze at. He was one of the highest decorated military men there was.
I really have no opinion on that, because I haven't read or studied enough of it to give a valid opinion. So what should I give that, a 5 then?
5, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. Okay, how about dinosaurs in the most conventional sense? You go to the Natural Museum of History, and there's a big, T-Rex skeleton. How accurate do you think that is? And I guess with the context, so it doesn't seem like it's a trick question, but like of the bone wars of the late 1800s, where there were scientists that were proven to have been just kind of making up different dinosaurs, because if you came up with a different name and a different arrangement, you could charge extra for it. So with that being the premise, how much do you believe in dinosaurs in general, as institutions have led us on for them?
I give that about a 9. I mean, they can carbon date those bones. I know there's different theories on that, and I do believe it is a species of creature that kind of somewhat resemble more of a modern day bird, in the sense that I do believe they existed. So I give that I'll say 8 or 9.
All right. How about and there's 2 qualifiers for this. The 2 qualifiers are fire breathing and flying dragons, having existed at any point in history.
I'll give that a 6 or 7, because what came out of that portal, that could be considered a dragon in a sense too, of what I saw. And the other thing too, if we're talking the material world, if there are these portals, who knows what type of creatures can enter our realm, then go back into their realm that has occurred over time or history. And I know the Chinese have their views on the dragon too. So yeah, I'd say 6 or 7. I'm not going to say no, that's impossible. So I'll say 6 or 7.
As you were describing it too, before you got to Yaldabaoth, I was thinking Falkor from the Neverending Story, which is basically built upon like Eastern versions of like the dog dragons.
And there's different views as far as if these entities are negative or not. Like there's something called Abraxas stones, which were around during the Roman times. And some people viewed that this entity was a good thing. And so who knows? It could be a whole species of these entities. It could be the one and only. It could be just have different moods on a different day. Nobody really knows.
Do you, I'm asking you to again speculate a little bit, but when you went through that experience and you saw the visions of like the serpent and then like the winged face and all this, do you think if those were real entities, were they like taking their time out of their day to give you personal focus to like answer your call? Or do you think it was like more of, it was almost like you put on like a streaming movie, and it's not like, all the actors got together and put the whole thing on just for you to watch it, but it was like a thing that you could tap into? Was it like, did you get personal, did the teacher come to your desk and give you like a personal instruction when that happened, or was it something different from that?
That's actually a great question, because I remember after the occurrence, remember I was being attacked by these entities saying how worthless I was. And then I had this divine experience. It's like I said, who am I to have such a profound cosmic experience like this? And knowing that, okay, there's something going on. And then again, who do I tell? Because everyone's going to just think you're a lunatic or drug me up on these antipsychotic drugs even more so, which I didn't want. There was a reason for having that cosmic encounter. And I truly believe those entities materialized in my room, even though there was no physicality that I could find the next day to confirm that it had occurred. I'm grateful that I went through that experience, but at the same time, I don't think I'd want to go through it again. It was shamanic in nature. There was parts of it that were terrifying. There were parts of it that were ecstatic, but it definitely influenced who I was as a human being. I realized that, I do believe that we do undergo a divine judgment after death, whether it's all the recordings in our own section on the hard drive, the Akashic records, you might say, of what we did or did not do in our lives too. I do think that there is a reason to be a good person, or as good as we can be.
So if you have schizophrenia though, and you show up at St. Peter's Gate, could you just be like, I was hacked, like I didn't put those files there, that came from an outside source? I
think they would know that. I think Divinity would know that's what had occurred too. And that's why I'm very, we all have to judge in our life. We have to apply discernment, but I think we have to be careful how we apply judgment or discernment in different situations. The divine mind, the universal consciousness, whatever you want to call it, that can be the ultimate judge, because it has all knowledge of all situations pertaining to a given incident. What the other person was thinking, what the other person was doing, what you were doing, what you were thinking. It puts it all together. So I think, schizophrenic showing at the pearly gates to enter heaven, I think God will know what that schizophrenic went through and judge accordingly with fairness.
There's I guess one closing thought, and I wish I could remember who said this to me so I could give him credit, but I haven't been able to get this thought out of my head, and that's that all of those temptations that you were talking about, the voices and all the bad things that they say, and even good things that they might say, but in particular, when you almost mentioned like a negotiation phase where like the manager kept coming on the phone and giving you a better and better deal, now it's 40% off, now it's 80% off, and we'll throw in this, and that you keep saying no to all that. Someone mentioned this to me, that maybe all of that, maybe the whole entire human experience is like a test to see how easily we'll succumb to temptation, because the very next level, like I guess once you break out of the third dimension, that thought form is like the thing that is reality. So you thinking something makes it so. So you don't actually have to physically do anything because you've bypassed the physical form. But if that were the case, then you can't let just anyone into a realm where any thought becomes reality, because if someone is filled with bad negative thoughts, the second they enter that world, just everything starts going awry, because all they're doing is just thinking horrible things. So that there's almost like a filtration process to make sure that those people don't get through the gates, and that because if they did, that like they would cause this havoc essentially.
I still have negative thoughts. Sometimes there's times I want to punch somebody in line at the store or something for doing something, but it's knowing yourself, realizing you're having those thoughts. And there's a big difference between having thoughts and acting upon them. Big difference. And that's what we have to recognize, is when you cross that threshold of acting on these detrimental thoughts that will cause real damage. And as far as this whole process that went through being some sort of test or initiation, that's entirely possible as well. But it's one heck of a test to go through. I'll say that much.
And just like you described it, like I don't want to go back to school either. Like I'm glad that part of my life is over. I don't want to go through any more tests or any more homework. But it's something that maybe a lot of people do have to go through. I guess closing question for both of you. But I've heard recently that these studies of like a small fraction of people that have no internal dialogue whatsoever, like they've never had like heard their own voice in their head. And I'm just curious, would that be like immune to schizophrenia, or would that put you in even more of a risk category if you don't have internal dialogue already?
Or an NPC, right? A non-player character.
Right, yeah. Or maybe you're an NPC, which I guess you don't have to worry about being schizophrenic if you're just an NPC.
Yeah, if they're not hearing the voices, then they're not there.
So internal dialogue, do you think, is required for the human experience? And it kind of it opens us up to this like horrible, I don't know, opening for entities or just negative thoughts. Is the internal dialogue existing, period?
Right.
Well, I think we need internal dialogue. It makes us who we are.
Yeah, so for anyone listening that doesn't have internal dialogue, sorry, you're actually an NPC. There's not a whole lot you can do about it, but on the upside, you can't be possessed.
Well, if you're listening, you're processing information. There is some sort of internal dialogue going on, period. You know, that's the way I see it.
Fair point. It's a fair point. Well, to any AI algorithm that's scouring the transcript for this and ingesting it, sorry, you're missing out on all this great internal dialogue.
So if I may I just plug a book that I wrote?
Please, absolutely.
Okay. So I did write this book. This is what got me to this path. This is what, in my search for religious truth, and the book is called Revelations on Interstellar Highway 10. It was actually written over a period of almost 20 or 30 years, but it was my search for truth, and it's actually what led me to Gnosticism. Carl Jung is what led me to Jerry Marzinsky, and I have a website, astroxrising.com, and I'll forward that to you in the show notes if you want. We'll post that later, but the book is kind of about my search for truth, and it's also to help somebody to have a more positive outlook to improve their condition. And it takes a look at the various religions throughout the world and kind of how to incorporate them into our life to basically make us better beings. And that's the objective. And whether this realm we live in, some people view it as a simulation, a boot camp, a prison, a training ground, a sandbox. Who knows why we're here? But there's something going on, and I guess we have to make the best of it while we're here.
And I'd like to push our book too. This is written by Sherry Sweeney and myself. Now, Sherry heard voices when she was a young girl. And she didn't tell me about it until I'd known her for 10 years. And once we got to, she was the first person I could talk to about the voices, because you can't just talk to anybody about them. And I would talk to the schizophrenics, they would understand. Sherry was the first sane person that I talked to about the psychotic voices. We got together and went, well, we got to write something for people to understand what these things are, you know, how they operate, where they came from. And
just to emphasize, the name of that book, Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower.
Yeah. You can get it from Amazon, or you can order it off my website at jerrymarzinsky.com, where there's a lot more information about the voices.
I'm curious, do you prefer if people get it directly from your site or from Amazon, or does it not matter to you?
Well, Amazon pays very little.
So buy it directly from your site if you can.
Yeah.
So, we could go on for another couple hours, but I want to be mindful of your time. I appreciate you coming back on and talking to me about this. It's been kind of like a once in a lifetime opportunity in a way, because I'm not going to find myself in a psychiatric environment. Well, hopefully, at least not on the end where I'd be like interviewing people about this. So this gives me a really unique opportunity. So thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Anon, for just letting me hear you guys out. This has been awesome.
You know what I got here, if you want me to read it? It's a poem written by a psych patient about the psych ward.
Please.
Okay. Let me read this thing, because it I think it encapsulates what these places are like. It's called the psych ward. It says, inside these plain adobe walls, unhappiness and misery are waiting, always waiting, to envelop and imprison me. The toxic atmosphere is real, invading body, mind, and soul. The staff are all burned out for good. There isn't anyone who's whole. We're all locked up here together. Disgusting, dirty, noisy hell. It's anything but therapeutic. No one here is getting well. Zombie patients walk the halls or lie in bed, devoid of life. Violence and agitation are the only part of all that's of all the strife. The staff are chained to their computers. There isn't time to help a soul. There's far too much to document. That's how our most important role. They call this place behavioral health. Misnomer. If there ever was one. There's nothing healthy in this place. With windows barred, no air or sun. The managers all crack their whips. We're never doing well enough. It's all the numbers game to them. They fill our minds with all their stuff. Every day that I'm at work, I long for something else instead. It sickens me to be here now. Constant pressure fills my head. Demands impossible to meet are draining all the life from me. One day I'll disappear from here, and then at last I'll be free.
Very deep and sad.
Yeah. I think that pretty much encapsulates a lot of these psych wards. Nobody's getting any better there.
And I remember, being in the psych ward and feeling, here I am, insane, being thrown among other insane people. And I'm like, how's this going to help me? I need the role models of people that are sane to kind of pull me out of this too. But I know they do group therapy and that sort of thing. But there's definitely pros and cons. And I was very fortunate at the place that I went to. I was able to get out. I felt some of the staff were generally there to help you with compassion. Others, I'm not so sure. I mean, I almost felt like some of these were some of the staff that were a little archonic or demonic into themselves.
Well, there's also a very strange dynamic in there. One where just the authority, right? If they're there as the caretaker and you're there as the patient, there's almost like a Stanford prison experiment authority loop that just happens, I think, naturally. But then you've also got people that sort of like butchers or people that work in abattoirs or ones that work in like factory farms that at a certain point, it's like you don't name your animal because you're going to have to kill your animal. And if you get into the habit of never naming them, then you never become so attached that when like the worst thing happens to them. So a lot of the time, part of that taboo, I think, that we were talking about before of like mental illness just in general, but it's that if you go into a situation and you don't feel like there's a way out, right? Like maybe you do feel that it's all a life sentence. Now all of a sudden you almost have to train yourself into being callous, because if you somehow have hope and you get attached to like, oh, you know what, we can help this person get through this, and it never happens because you're in the system that's only giving drugs and it's basically you're just giving Tums to everyone and expecting like their gastrointestinal problems to just dissolve, you know what I mean? But all you're ever doing is giving them antacids. And I think that if that's all you were doing, at a certain point, you're just like, oh, it's hopeless. And then that hopelessness almost turns into like disdain and contempt for the people that you're trying to help, because now they're making you feel bad that you can't help them. It's a vicious cycle, I guess.
And suicide.
Oh, not just the patients, but the people that work within the profession, I assume you mean.
Well, psychiatrists have one of the highest suicide rates of any doctor.
Oh, this is like right next to dentists?
Right, yeah, they're up there among dentists.
And I guess just to make things clear, in general, would we lump psychology and psychiatry into this same bubble, or do psychologists get like a little asterisk next to them and don't get lumped in because they don't prescribe drugs?
Well, I think they're using an archaic system that doesn't work. I mean, I spent 8 years in undergraduate, master's, and graduate, PhD program. Nothing they taught me there made any. It didn't work when you got onto the front line, and you're on the front lines of mental health. Nothing they taught worked. There is something out there now called the MACE energy method, which is an energetic therapy that does work. It will go in and it will get rid of psychological problems. It goes to the cause and gets rid of them. You know, now any of you out there thinking about taking these psychiatric drugs, please go to www.causisminstitute.com first. Find yourself a causism therapist. They can get rid of most psychological problems in an hour. It's almost amazing. It's like magic. Don't take those drugs without trying this first.
And I previously had a professional hypnotist on that was advocating very much the same, that like before you go down the road of just starting to ingest drugs and going on the trial, right, and going through like that trial and error process where, you know, maybe for 6 months they put you on a bunch of different ones and say, hey, how's it feeling now? How's it feeling now? That you could go and try and see a hypnotherapist as well, and that sometimes those eliminate the whole need to go into any other pharmaceuticals. And I wanted to tag on this one thing it's probably going to follow me to my grave, but it's like this weird contradiction, because Anon, you mentioned Carl Jung, and that like that was almost like this, not to put words in your mouth, but it sounded like it was almost like a entryway into like this Gnostic thought and integration of shadow work and all of this. But there's also something that Carl Jung advocated for the longest time, and that was this concept of a toxin X, where he theorized there was an actual chemical that existed or was synthesized somewhere in the body / brain, and that chemical, it's kind of seems like the chemical imbalance argument that is now prevalent today. And it's so weird to me that the guy that is kind of credited with giving us like archetypes and integrating shadow work and all of this, which kind of feels like the antithesis to pharmaceuticals, in some way he kind of was advocating for this chemical imbalance aspect.
That was interesting you bring that up. That was very early on in his career, because I went back into my Admirable Psych books in recent years to see, okay, had I seen this images of the serpentine entity somewhere before? And I was going back through my psychology books to see if somehow it had been planted in my mind. And I found a little blurb on Carl Jung in there that said, yeah, he was experimenting trying to find that Agent X or whatever it was in there. That's all it said about Carl Jung. And I think that was his very early years into his research. And later on, he started realizing, wow, some of what these patients are saying are what the Gnostics had talked about. And Carl Jung wore an Abraxas ring. He wore a ring that had that serpentine entity on it because he felt like there was something to it. And I know he and Freud split off with that, because I think Carl Jung is very much into the spirit, getting into the spirit, even though he couldn't say that from a professional standpoint. I think he was one of these type of people that probably had some of these shamanic experiences himself.
Well, he did.
And realized that there's something to it. So I guess the key thing is we got to focus on treating the spirit more so than just drugging people out when they have issues in life.
Yeah, we're spiritual beings. I mean, you can't ignore the spirit. And that's one thing Mace takes into account, the spiritual part of people. You know, psychology doesn't do that. Psychiatry doesn't do that. That's why it doesn't work.
Well, I appreciate both of you coming on again. If you've got any other final words or last shout outs, please take this opportunity all the time that you want to do so.
Well, I'd like to thank you, because your platform is basically provides a place for us to give this public service announcement to let the world know that, hey, schizophrenia is not a life sentence. And so many people falsely believe that. And I know I've heard, oh, you outgrew it because you got older. I mean, come on, that's BS. I mean, it was a spiritual bout that I got through, and I got to this point. So it's not a life sentence. There is hope. There is treatment out there. And again, Jerry Marzinsky's website gives you some ways to deal with these voices.
Yeah. JerryMarzinsky.com. There's some programs there that will help you deal with the voices under articles.
All right, well, Jerry, Anon, thanks again. I'll lead us out with a little outro, and thank you to all the Patreons that are making these shows happen. This one, the last one we had Jerry on, was one that had some of the most comments. A lot of people that it sounds like they'd never even heard this premise before, and it's getting people to look into more alternate sort of therapy. So you guys going around and going on shows and talking, it's absolutely working. I only know about you because I was referred to you by Lobster and Raven of Nephilim Death Squad. And I know they're like absolute fans of your work, Jerry, in particular Raven, because he has a very similar story to Anon in a way where he overcame this outside of the conventional way. So shout out to all those guys, shout out to you. I would rather this be what people were talking about constantly instead of like whatever nose job like a celebrity had. Like I wish everyone was just talking about schizophrenic demon entities. Like that would be such a better world.
Amen to that.
Yeah, they don't want you knowing about them. Yeah, like they said, the biggest trick the devil ever pulled was that he doesn't exist.
Ready for a cosmic conspiracy about Stanley Kubrick, moon landings, and the CIA? Go visit nasacomic.com.
nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com. Oh, nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
Never a Straight Answer is a 40-page comic about Stanley Kubrick directing the Apollo space missions.
Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
This is the perfect read for comic, Kubrick, or conspiracy fans of all ages. For more details, visit nasacomic.com.
Spread the word with propaganda packs, all for just $40 shipped at paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid propaganda packs. We got facts on these sticker slaps. So grab yourself a stack and go attack with these paranoid propaganda packs.
These huge all-weather slaps will last in public for years to come. Remind citizens that birds are not real, self-immolation is an option, and might make you magnetic. Do your part and get a propaganda pack today from paranoidamerican.com.
Yeah, paranoid propaganda packs. We got facts on these sticker slaps. So grab yourself a stack and go attack with these paranoid propaganda packs.
What are you waiting for? Go to paranoidamerican.com right now and get a paranoid propaganda pack.
All American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all that and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies, all of these and more on our sticker sheets.
Explore the unique with Paranoid American sticker sheets. Unearth tales of cryptids, cults, and mysteries through each sticker. These won't last long. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
We're all American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all that and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies, all of these and more on our sticker sheets.
What the heck are you waiting for? Discover the extraordinary with Paranoid American sticker sheets. From cryptids in the night to cults out of sight, each sticker is a unique find. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I Scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane. Paper, the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel. When it's real to real, you will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hate, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb. Distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Matters not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.